All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for waiting the whole 15 minutes. Let's get this thing started, shall we? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. All right, a few quick notes here I want to make. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to stream Wednesday. I've been slightly feeling under the weather almost this whole week, so I've been sucking on cough drops. I've been taking medicine, so forgive me if my voice starts to sound a little raspy or if I get a little nasally. It hasn't really been much of a headache, just kind of like a sinus cold. So bear with me on this, guys. I really appreciate you coming around, sticking around. Hope this review gives you a little insight before Kindred drops this week. So excited for it! Oh my god! So I did Astro last week. I hope you guys had a chance to go look at that video. If not, the YouTube link is down below by description. You can go to that, check out all my videos that I posted there. Otherwise, they should be on my Twitch stream, hopefully. Cross my fingers I did that right. I don't know. Today we're doing Dread. Dread I have looked at a little bit. Obviously, the set's been out for physical cards for a while. I have been doing some deck building and whatnot. I haven't just been sitting on my thumbs waiting for the app to come out. I've been theory crafting these decks, trying to make some really fun stuff. I'm a man who enjoys his gimmicks. So if you want a very serious streamer, I will try to be that on some days. But about 75% of the time, I will just try and make some out of the left field park decks that go off a strange gimmick that have a theme to them to try and see what they were trying to get from the set. I know the developers make these cards in a way to have cards work together, try and build a set with the families and everything like that. So I like to try and go with what's in their mind when they're building and see what they're trying to come up with and see if it's actually viable. Obviously, as the meta will get developed, people will come out with these top-tier decks like Dolo or Selene and stuff like that. So before that all happens, I just want to start throwing cards in decks and see what happens this come Kindred. So when that comes out, I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys love to watch me just make a fool of myself and lose some ranks with these crazy fun decks. With that aside, we're going to go into Dread. Dread, I do have, on my second monitor over here, I do have the entire Dread set up on the Lightseekers app. There are some cards, obviously, as you know, disclaimer, when I talk about these reviews, I look at solely the card as itself and how it impacts the current meta without trying to redefine the new meta that comes out, because we all know this is going to change the entire game state as a whole. Everyone here knows that people are going to build crazy new decks, probably modify the current ones. So there's going to be a lot of new decks that come out with this new meta, so I don't want to try and anticipate. I wanted to try and base the review off of what the card is, what it does, how it can impact the current meta, and that'll kind of be my review of the basis of these 5-star ratings that I give to these cards. Obviously, I will be right on about 50-50 of these, so we'll see, and I hope that I'm wrong on a lot of the ones that I give bad ratings to, because I want to believe that all cards have its own place. But obviously some don't. Some do, because they're better and worse, but... so yeah, that's kind of how I'm going to do my review. However, with looking through the cards, especially with Dread, and the new family orders, there are some cards in here that rely on the families. So I'll be looking at the web page as a whole to just kind of see how many of the cards that certain family are, to kind of give a better review of some of the star ratings that I have been giving in the past, which I realized I should have been doing in the past to kind of get a better understanding of how some of these family mechanics work. I feel like I did okay with the Beasts. Beasts, I mean, as a whole, with how many cards throughout the whole set, they're going to be a universal family that are going to be played across several colors. So I feel like I wasn't too far off doing those. But with Dread, I knew they involve Undead and the new Umbron class, or family, which I don't think is that far spread out. So just in that, I want to see how many specific cards of that family there are now going back and forth between the colors to kind of give a better review of how these cards are going to impact the game as a whole. So I hope that makes a little more sense to you guys. After the stream, I'm going to do a little talking about what I feel the patch notes are going to come up for the future, what's going to come up with the current patch notes. So if you stick around after the video, I'm going to give a brief talk about that, what my feelings are about how long the delay was, their description of why it took so long, and all this stuff to kind of give a better understanding. I'm going to try and do that from more of a game developer standpoint with my game developing background to kind of help people who don't know a whole lot about the pipeline of how games are made and all that stuff works. So just to kind of give you a little more feedback of my opinion on what they've told us, what they're doing, stuff like that, to kind of hopefully give you guys a better understanding of why it took them so long. So I know they get a great description, but it's a stream. I want to talk. I want to give my opinion on this stuff. So I hope you guys are okay with that. Cool. All right, let's get right into the stream, shall we? The Dread review is a go. Let's start out with the first card, Abyss Shade. Okay, so it is an elemental family. 4 corner buff, 4 clunky corner. Gotta love those clunky corners. Deal rotation damage to your target and heal for that rotation when you use an ability. As this enters play, draw 1 card if you have another shadow buff in play. Okay, so it's part of the Abyss family. Like, we have Abyss Lurkers, we have Abyss Tentacles, all those stuff where the Abysses are kind of doing stuff when you use abilities. So I really like the theme of this card. I really do. I just compared to those other ones though, I feel like it's not going to have that much of an impact. I mean, if you look at the former Abyss card, where you use an ability and you heal for one, what is it called? The Abyss Weaver. So if you use Abyss Weaver here and use an ability, you heal for one. That's completely fine. If you use Abyss Tentacle, you deal 2 damage instead of 1. And those are consistent buffs. So those will stay on the board. They won't rotate or do anything like that. When Abyss Tentacle comes into play, you get an additional action. When Abyss Weaver comes into play, you get a pretty decent heal for 4. So in this one, you'd get to draw a card if another Shadow Buff's in play. So it's still going along those lines. But, I mean, compared to those other 2 cards, this card is just, it's not good. A, because it's not consistent. If it was a consistent one, it's like when you use an ability, you deal 1, heal 1. That would be awesome. Everyone, I believe, would run that over Abyss Weaver itself because it does more than Abyss Weaver would. And people might even run it over Abyss Tentacle because it's 1 less damage, yeah, but when it comes into play, you get to draw a card, which is essentially what people sometimes do with Abyss Tentacle. They lay it, take that additional action to draw a card. I know a lot of people do that just because the decks that revolve around that use abilities, take up a lot of your turn, so you want to use the additional actions to draw cards to make sure your hand isn't completely empty. This one, I guess, only does it for 4 corners. So, like, compared to those other 2 buffs, it really, I don't think, has a place in its own. I want to give this, man, it's not as bad as a 1-star, but it's like a 1.5. Compared to the other cards next to it, it's really not going to be playable next to the other Abyss cards. Like I said, it only lasts for 4 corners. The only thing that it has over it is it's not a very buff removal threat, because it is limited to 4 abilities. It'll go away, so as opposed to Tentacle and Weaver that stay out there forever, this one is like, well, I'll not kill this one. They can take their 4 damage and 4 healing from this one card if they use abilities. And mind you can only use 1 ability a turn. So yes, this card is going to be out there for 4 turns, at least, because unless of course you lay the Dread card that lets you use more abilities in a turn, in which case then, this will take 3 turns to get rid of, because you can't use the ability with additional actions on the same turn you lay this. So it'll be 1, the next one you can do 2, then the last one you do 1. So it'll still be out there for 3 turns. But yeah, needless to say, I just don't think this card is going to see play really a whole lot. I mean, the only time you want to see this card is if you splash Shadow into a deck that uses abilities, and you can't afford to take up 6 card slots with both Tentacle and both Weavers. But even at that point, I would just run Tentacles over these any day. Tentacles would give you an additional action if another Shadow Buff's in play, which you could use to do something, like use an ability instead of draw a card. This one is just, it's a meh. It's trying to be both of those at once, and it's doing like 50% of each, and it's not doing it well enough to be better than those 2. So I'm gonna give this like a 1.5 star rating, which is sad because it's the first card of the set that I'm reviewing, and I'm already giving such a bad rating to it. I don't want to see that, but I think that's how I feel about this card. Is it's not going to have an impact over the game at all compared to those other cards until the set starts cycling out, rotating, until we get newer sets down the line, and say Awakening and Mythical for some reason rotate out. I don't know why they would ever rotate out Awakening. It's their base set. It's the only set with buff removal in it. It's the only set with the core cards. So I don't ever think Awakening is going to rotate out, but Mythical might. In which case, Abyss Tentacle and Abyss Weaver are in the core set. This one is still not going to get run. So like, this card you'll probably only see in draft if you only draft Kindred, because you won't find the other 2 in Kindred at all. But it's just, this card it's not good. Even Abyss Tentacle is also an elemental. So like, if you're trying to make an elemental deck, why not just run Abyss Tentacle over this? That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just, I don't think it's going to be that good of a card in the game. I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of it, if any of it, personally. Alright, next card. Blight Grace. So our first undead card. Love it. 3 damage. The recipient moves 2 defend cards from their hand to their deck. Now, this looks really cool to me. It's with Poison. Poison is obviously the Dread's damage-oriented class. Obviously, Shadow is more support. Use the abilities, all the stuff you get. You can splice Shadow in a lot better than you can with all the other ones. But with the Poison, how the whole kind of alignment works, Poison is their major damage. It wants them to not be able to heal a whole bunch. It wants them to just like slowly trickle down their health, at least from what I'm seeing and viewing of these cards. So I think this card is really good at what it does. It's 3 damage, then they move 2 defend cards from their hand. So it's like 3 damage, and if you were going to heal next turn and do anything, they shuffle back into your deck. It mitigates their opponent's hand size, which also reduces their chance for playing combos with these cards. Makes it so they can't heal outside of buffs. It's a really good control-y type card. It's one of those cards that I'm going to see splashed into a lot of decks. So if you start running Poison, you're going to run this card a lot. It's going to be really good in draft. What I've been finding too is just basing on the decks that I've been building, any cards that are really hand mitigation are actually really, really powerful. Like they're almost on another level where it's like it's not you drawing cards, it's them reducing their hand size and limiting their next turns, which in this game you don't draw a card at the beginning of your turn, you draw it after you basically don't do anything for a turn to refill your hand size. So having them move 2 cards back from their hand, if they're only holding like 4, that cuts their hand size in half if they were defend cards. And a lot of decks, I know Astral runs a lot of defense, so this is going to be really strong against Astral. Mountain, their defend cards, Boulder Feast, that's 2/6 healings from their hand and all this other stuff that you can do with it. So I think this card is actually going to see a lot of play. I don't think it's going to have a lot of impact on the game. I do think, however, it is going to be an unsung hero for Dread that a lot of people are going to want to splash in at least 2 copies of, I want to say. So I'm going to give this, it's bouncing around a 3.5 to a 4-star rating for me just because it's a solid, well-designed card. Obviously, it's only 3 damage. If you're running against very heavy aggro, the defend's going to do nothing for you, and then it's only going to be a 3 damage card. But also, it is an undead card, which has a lot more synergy with some of the cards that do undead. And in one of the Dread weapons that's coming up down the line, I'll review it, its ability makes it so this card could just be better. So if you run that weapon, obviously, in a Dread deck, in a more undead-aligned, family-oriented deck, I feel like this card's going to have a really strong place for you. So I would not be surprised if some people run 2 copies of this, maybe even 3, depending on how this is going. So I give this like a really, really solid rating. I hope to see a lot of it, just in Dread decks alone, to make it so they can't out-heal you when you're trying to just get them really low. Has an undead family, all this. There's so much going on, positive things about this card that I really like it. I want to give it the 3.5. Because a lot of decks out there are being more aggressive, they are being more buff-oriented, so they probably won't get a whole lot of use on the defend, but it is an undead, which you're going to find more useful in the long run if you're running that more family-oriented deck. So that's why I'm going with 3.5. Next card, Bloodpacks Redeemer. All right, we got a shadow card, attack, burn. So obviously this one cannot be caught by Soar effects. It has to go right to the grave, you can't bring it back. Everyone knows what burn does, I hope by now. If not, the rule changing is in there. You can go ahead and check that out. So hopefully you guys can understand the more mechanics after Kindred came out. Attack, 4 damage. You may move 1 combo card from your discard pile to your deck. Okay, so this card, it's kind of a mixture of Spirit Gate, which is a card that was nerfed post-Kindred because of how potent it was in a lot of decks, because that card also did not have burn. It allowed you to bring 2 combo cards back, but it also allowed you to draw a card. It was a defend card, it was still shadow, along with this one. This one, however, is an attack. So I think this one, depending on the playstyle the deck is going for, I mean, if you're trying to be a very aggressive, more just really harsh attacking playstyle, you may want to run this over it, because you don't care about bringing back 2 combos. You may just want 1 combo to really pay for some stuff, or another Horrific Nightmare to do another 10 damage, kind of that style of deck. This one might be better over it. It doesn't allow you to draw a card, which Spirit Gate was really essential about doing. You put 2 cards back in, you draw a card. This one doesn't have a family oriented to it, so you can't really utilize it in a whole lot of decks, but it is, mind you, just 4 damage. 4 damage is okay. 4 damage attack is completely fine. There's a lot of cards out there that go 4, 5, and 6. 4 ones usually have a really good ability going with it. 6 usually have a little bit of drawback. That's how they balance it out with these cards. So I feel like this card, it's like, as a whole, this card I feel is a solid card. It's a solid 3. In the current meta, I really don't feel like it has a place anywhere, based on the other decks that are coming out, because Spirit Gate is so potent. Dread is such a potent kind of long game attrition decks where they use a lot of their abilities and a lot of their buffs to deal slow trickling damage and make it so that your opponent just gets overwhelmed in the long run, kind of like a snowball effect. Whereas this one feels like it's more aggressive, which I don't feel like a lot of Dread decks do outside of some Sicario really aggressive aggro, aggro buff decks. So maybe that one has a place in it, but at that time, they're only playing 1 or 2 combos that really are effective. So it's a toss-up. I want to say this card gets like a 2-star rating from me. It's a 3-star rating as a whole, but if you're placing it in the meta right now where it is, it's not going to see play over Spirit Gate. It's not going to see play even over Mantic Spitter. Mantic Spitter does 1 more damage, which you might even want for this. It can be brought back with other cards. It is a poison card, if I'm not mistaken, so you can bring it back with Venom Feeder, I believe, is the dead card that allows you to bring a poison card back. So like stuff like that, this card really won't see a whole lot of effect. It won't change the game a whole lot compared to those other 2 cards until, like I said, some of these cards get rotated out, some get nerfed along the way. You never know. You never know with these card games. Some cards could get completely changed because of the interactions they have within the other cards. So right now, this is only going to be a 2-star card for me because it's not that impactful to the game. It doesn't do anything better than what a current card already does. It still has burn just like Spirit Gate, so it's not like this card can also be brought back to do other stupid, ridiculous stuff or be caught by the store effects. 4 damage is really the only thing it has going for it, and there's a lot of other damaging spells for Dread. Even abilities and buffs do more damage than this, so I just don't think that this card is going to have that much of an impact on the game right now in its current state. So, on to the next one. Rune Rafe. Poison, undead. Alright, loving it so far. 1 damage. Then if the recipient has 15 or less health, they move 2 cards from their hand to their deck. This card, in my opinion, is going to be amazing. I really feel like this card is going to have a place in the current meta, especially like I was talking before with Dread, with Blight Grace, moving 2 defend cards back, but it's like 3 damage, move 2 back. That card I think is going to have some decent play. This one I think is going to have an amazing impact on the game. The way Dread works, it is very slow attrition. You know, you slowly poke them down to the point where it's like they get to 10 and then they're like, okay, well I'm feeling kind of okay. I'll start storing my hand up, get a little more defensive, bounce back once I remove their buffs. Kind of that's how you want to play against Dread, or at least right now against Sicario, is you want to be able to remove key cards from them, make them not do a whole lot, have them in a pickle where they can't do a whole lot of anything to you while you store your hands up. So what this one does is it pretty much, while you're slowly trickling them down, while you're dealing that minuscule 2 damage a turn, 3 damage a turn, using abilities to ramp up your damage. This one, obviously, 1 damage is not going to matter that whole lot unless it's like a clunky corner damage reduction where it'll, you can bypass 5 damage and make it rotate with just 1. That's the best benefit you can get. But this one, if they have 15 or less health, which, eventually later in the game you will, they move 2 cards from their hand to their deck. Not action cards, not attack cards, defend, nothing. It's just 2 cards. So it's like, while they're trying to store up their hand, you move 2 cards, any cards from their choice, back to their deck, which could be really impactful later in the game when they only have, say, 2 or 3 cards. You move almost their entire hand back to their deck if they're below 15 health, which is what you want to do. Which is what Poison, in my opinion, is really good and advantageous to this class, is making it so that you not only like try and prevent them from healing, try and prevent them from doing anything while Shadow and Death are like killing them themselves, is Poison is just like corrupting their hand, which is what I'm really happy to see about this new set, is they're going in a slightly different corruption way with Poison, other than you can't heal, but more like it infects their hand. It affects their hand in a way it's like they can't really do anything to you, which is, I think Poison is going to have a lot better cards, just based on these first 2 cards that I'm seeing, and some of the other ones that I've seen. It's really going to have an impact on the game over Shadow and over the Death cards, are these type of cards, because hand mitigation is going to be extremely powerful. I'm telling you right now, just as card draw is extremely powerful, hand mitigation is going to be extremely useful in these games. So I want to say this card also gets a 3.5 to a 4-star rating, somewhere in between there. Obviously, it is an undead, another undead for Poison, which is going to be very useful in an undead family. I cannot wait to try and build an undead purple deck, just to try and really go hard on that undead gimmick. 15 or less health is really not that hard to get to. Even Tech wants to be below 15 or less health. So, like, putting this against any deck, getting them below half health is not that hard in a game where, not a whole lot of healing unless they're playing the super long game, which is kind of what you're doing too, where you have a lot of resources out of your Abyss Tentacles, out of your Night Lurkers, all this kind of stuff if you're going with the current set. So getting them down without using too many cards will not be that difficult. Moving cards back to their deck makes it so they have to basically use a turn to draw cards, wastes their turn, slows them down. So this card is going to have major impact against those decks, especially like Aggression. If you're going against Aggression, they'll usually only have about 2 cards in their hand every turn because they're wanting to like attack, draw. Moving those 2 cards back slows down Aggression almost entirely, because then their 2 cards you could draw are not the attack cards they were handling in their hand. It could not be buff removal, it could be nothing really useful as they're trying to refill their hand, as they're trying to come back from this detriment that you just made them move. So this card is like, I want to say right now it's getting a 3.5 from me, just because I don't know how extremely impactful or how slow down the new meta is going to be, but right now in this current meta, it's gonna be a huge detriment against a lot of decks where, obviously some cards will be like, well, you haven't laid a whole lot of this, so I'll move 2 defend cards back, or I'll move 2 attack. I really want to play more defensive, so it forces them into that style. But like a lot of decks right now are playing the slow game. Granted is Dolo gets card draw back really easily. Tempest, all this stuff gets card draw, so it's really not that impactful as you'd think because the card draw is so good. Sorry guys, internal burp. But this card is, I think, going to be played a lot in the new upcoming Dread, and I'm very happy to see that these new cards for Dread are actually going to make Dread almost an entirely new archetype outside of the Sicario, which Sicario, it's like either Sicario or Arwen were the only 2 ones that you really saw play. So I'm feeling like once we get into this new set, we'll see more heroes, we'll see more deck archetypes outside of the buff Dread. We'll start seeing some really cool decks come out of Dread, and I'm really happy about that. I'm really excited. But this one, it's just a solid card. I think it's going to stay right around the mid-range for me. It's nothing extremely impactful that'll wreck the game or make like a winning card, but it is just going to be a really solid defensive metagaming card for what it is. So that's my review. Next one, Covetous Shade. Poison, undead. I'm loving this so far, guys. I'm loving it. 4 corner, first 2 do nothing. The buff is technically dormant with the X corner on it. Corner 3, damage to your target. Corner 2, draw 4, or corner 4, draw rotation cards. This one is actually going to, it's not going to see a whole lot of play, but if you're going a very undead oriented, this card is going to be very good. It's kind of a mixture between Draga Hoarder and the one that draws you cards in Dread. It's like oh, what's that buff? Where it draws X cards depending on how many buffs you have in play. Oh god, I'm gonna find it here. Hold with me. Hold with me. Shade Supplier or Shadow Supplier. So in the end, Shadowy Supplier obviously can draw you a lot of buffs because Dread is very buff oriented. It's very get a whole like 6 or 7 buffs out, lay this card, hope no one removes it to refill your hand really quick. But at the same time, that one can be mitigated by if you get really low and you run a deck with Devour. You want to eat a whole bunch of your buffs, and that one's only going to draw you 1 or 2 cards at the very end, last corner. Or your buffs are going to rotate out unless you have the consistent buffs to stay out there. So a lot of times I really only see Shadowy Supplier draw you about 3 or 4 cards. So having this one, basically do the same thing, but before that you do 2 damage. So it's like a small little poke damage, just get that little in there, and then draw 2 cards. I think that's going to be really good. I think some people might even swap this out in a more poison-oriented deck over... Thank you, the White Wolf. Shadowy Supplier, yes, I found it too. So I really hope this card will see some play. Mind you, I'm just thinking about this in the new people, if they're running Nemi. Nemi, I don't really know his full name, but he's the new Storm Dread hero that says whenever you lay a combo, you may rotate one of your poison buffs to its final corner. So if you lay this, I mean, obviously, yes, you lay a combo buff, rotate this, deal 2, draw 2 cards. It's not the best one to rotate. There's a lot more burst damage coming out of Nemi that I feel is going to be extremely useful. My friends and I have already started building our own Nemi decks, and there's just a lot better poison buffs to rotate outside of this. But I mean, it's a decent poison buff. You're going to draw 2 cards at the very end of it. You're going to deal 2 damage. So obviously, the better reward is at the end because card draw is that good. But I just, looking at this card, I want to say it's going to be good, but I really don't think it is. I want to give it a 2-star rating. The only thing it really has going for it for me is the fact that it's part of the Undead family. Undead, I really have a strong feeling could be a fun family to play with in the long run, in the future. But right now, it's not that impactful. 2 damage is 2 damage. You get that from Draga Hoarder. You get that from a lot of other buffs. I can't even look right now. You get that from the one 4 healing, 2 damage, yada yada yada. 2 damage is like it's the poison based damage line. It's 2 damage. Draw 2 cards. Cool, you get to draw 2 cards after 4 turns of laying this. So you really want to draw more cards past that. You want to be able to get a benefit out of this. If I know there's one hero that says you can rotate one of your undead corners up to 2 corners. So I mean, running that in that type of deck with that hero, this could be really good. Putting this down, next turn it rotates to an X. Use her ability, deal 2 damage, draw 2 cards. Essentially, was what her ability becomes is 2 damage, 2 cards, which then her ability is amazing. It's really good. Having cards that, maybe there's cards in there that'll catch undead buffs or make it so that when a buff goes to the graveyard, it does this. So in her, if you use her as a hero, I really think this card is going to be good for her. But outside of that, I just don't see this card being played a whole lot. So that's why I'm giving it like a 2-star rating, where it has a place in the future that I'm seeing in my head. But right now, no one would run this in any of their decks currently. There's just not a place for it. You're going to want to run an Undead family. You're going to run it almost with her specifically. Otherwise, there's a lot better cards out there that just do better things for the class. All right, next card we have Crude Exterminator. So we have our first Umbron family. So I'm really excited for Umbron. I have looked, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of Umbron cards. I hope they fix that, and I hope they make it a lot more powerful than it should be. Poison, gotta love it. 3 damage. Remove 2 beast buffs from the recipient. Now, I have a feeling this one is going to be a really good card in sideboard, but probably nowhere else, unless a lot of people start running beasts. I'm sitting here just looking at beast buffs alone. There's 41 beast buffs. I'm going down, obviously Bubblefish is now a beast. Corvid Conspiracy is now a beast. Draga Hunter, Draga Scorcher, they're all beasts. Guard Snail, which Hunger Behemoth is a beast. Magmortem is even a beast. Just going down, looking at some of these cards that were played in the current meta, that people will probably continue to play. Thunderslug is a beast. Toxicrog is a beast. People are probably going to start playing that now with Nemi. So like this card it's a 2-buff removal, but it has to be specific buffs. Yes, it can be brought back, unlike the Shadow Puppet. So looking at that, it could be good if you're going against a very heavy beast style deck. Like I said, very good for the sideboard. Otherwise, this card is not going to see a whole lot of play. 3 damage, 3 damage. It's fine. You can use it for 3 damage, but you really want to be able to remove 2 buffs for 1 card. I mean, even removing one buff could be good. It's an extra buff removal for your deck if you run it, but it has to be a beast. So depending on how strong the beast meta comes out, how many cards out there that obviously are using beasts, like Thunderslug, like Corvid Conspiracy, like Dragon Scorcher, all this stuff that like you really see consistently on ladders, you consistently climb it. This card could have a 1-of spot in your deck, it could have a none of. I mean, it's a good, solid card. I feel like it's going to have a place once beasts start taking their rise. I really hope the beasts become one of the more dominant families, because it has the potential, in my opinion, it has the really strong potential for beasts to just be one of the top tier families out there. In which case, Dread is going to outrun it with this card. They're going to put 2 in, counter all the beast decks. But I really think this card only gets a 2-star rating, because right now in the meta, there is not a really good place for it. I mean, the only card that you were going to see outside of it, because Storm was not that hard in the meta, I'm looking at like the top 3 or 4 colors, is the Draga Scorcher. And it's like you have to have it at that time, because Draga Scorcher is only a 1x 6 damage, so you have to have it in your hand at that time. And when you do it, potentially people lay Colossi Ritual Site with Draga Scorcher, which is not a beast. And the one you really want to get rid of is that Ritual Site, because then they'll lay 2 more cards, which essentially, if you remove Draga Scorcher, 2 cards is 6 damage from Ritual Site, which is what Draga Scorcher would have done. So that's why I'm like, this is not going to be that impactful in the current meta. We'll see how the new meta changes with all the cards, but that's why I'm only giving it like a 2-star rating. 2-star because I feel like it's not completely worthless. It's not going to be one of the dead cards that they just made to fill a spot in the hole. It is going to have a spot in the current, or newer meta, I should be saying. But right now, it's one of those cards you open it up and go, oh, I'll save that for when Kindred actually comes out. One of those type of cards. It is Umbron, and like I said, I hope Umbron becomes a better class. As a family, I want to try and build a fun Umbron deck, but right now, looking at the cards, there's not that many, and I hope that at past Kindred, they really start to flesh out that family a little more outside of the Unaligned and Dread, because I feel like it could be a really fun family class to play. Next one, Dusk Talon Assassin. So we have a Chimchu. We have a Chimchu in Shadow. Awesome. Chimchu is almost strictly 2 Unaligned and Astral, so having one in Dread gives me a little hope that maybe they're going to finally be able to splash more of these families together, like Beasts, like Elemental, like Location, all that stuff, where obviously, yes, it would be nice for one color to have its own specific family oriented to it. That'll be really strong for that color, but being able to splash and make the hybrid decks is what this game is all about. It's about being fun, splashing in weapons, making it super fun to play. So having these families being able to cross a little bit between them makes me a little more happy to see that, as opposed to just being in one family, or one alignment. Let's go into the card. Shall we? Attack. 3 damage. Trigger one of your abilities. Conditional rotating a buff with abilities. Still rotate if applicable. This card, I think, could be really good. Because obviously 3 damage is 3 damage. Perfect, whatever, gotta love it, do the thing that you do the thing. But it triggers one of your abilities. So it could be a weapon ability, it could be your hero ability, it could be a buff ability, it could be any ability, because it does not specify what it has to be on. Conditional rotating ability, so if you use it on, say if you splash this into green, an animal, use it on Stampeding Tusker, you rotate it with its defend ability, you use the defend ability, which then triggers the giant bumblebee card. Can't think of that name. When you use the defend ability, rotate this card. You didn't... Really? This card isn't... It is insane. It's a really nice card. Second favorite Dread card in Kindred. Second, I cannot wait till I find your first one. I can't wait, dude. The White Wolves. I cannot wait till I find it. I mean, this card just has so much potential. Obviously, in Dread, you use a lot of abilities. So you can use this, activate Night Lurker. Then, on top of that, it does not say it takes up your ability spot. You could then use Night Lurker again, getting a lot of abilities out of Abyss Tentacles. Like this one, this card not only has great potential inside of Dread because it uses so many abilities. Royal Bumbler, thank you for that. Yes, Royal Bumbler is the bee that rotates when you use defend abilities, and its attack ability is deal the damage, and I think it restarts the buff when you use the attack ability in its fourth corner. But yeah, using this does not take up your ability slot, so you could use 2 abilities in a turn, which means, like, with all of the stuff that trigger once you use abilities in Dread, that's an amazing card synergistically to do. To be able to trigger, Abyss Tentacles, Abyss Weavers, all this stuff just multiple times in a turn could be a really swing damage. If you think about it, in most Dread decks, you'll have 2 Tentacles out in a turn and an Abyss Lurker. So you lay Dust Talon, activate Abyss Lurker. So you did 3 from Dust Talon, 2 from Abyss Lurker, 4 from the 2 Tentacles. This card now becomes a 9 damage card, which then afterwards you can activate Abyss Lurker again, doing another 6 damage. That's 15 damage from 1 card and 1 ability. That is insane burst damage. I feel like this card, I mean, that's just in Dread. You splash this into other ones because it is just Shadow, and like just splashing Shadow in for just this one card could be really good in an ability-heavy deck. So I mean, I feel like this card is going to be a 4 to 5 star rating. So I'll put it like 4.5, just because in the current meta, with how many stuff that uses abilities, like I mean, think about this. Use it with Cassini. 3 damage. Use your ability to discard a card for 3 more damage. That's 6 damage from this. Then discard a card for 6 months. 9 damage from Astral. Like, that's how potentially dangerous just this one card can be from using abilities, triggering abilities, not using them alone. Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can use this on combo abilities. In Red, I think it's Rock Fists. That's like 5 damage prevention, but then it has an attack ability to deal 5 damage. So you can use it on that, deal 8. Use it again, deal 5. Like, you can put this in almost any deck that uses. I think there's also one in Animal, the double Animal one. Yep, Empowered Implant. Oh my God! Don't even. Oh, so Empowered Implant. If you guys don't really know what it is, it's a tech combo buff. It's 1 mechanical, 1 explosive. You put it into play, it deals 3 damage to you, but on the next turn it has an attack ability to deal 15 damage to your opponent. So laying this, 3 damage, activate Empowered Implant for 15, that's 18 damage. Use the ability again, that's another 15 damage. That's 33 damage from a combo. Yeah, exactly. It's 33 damage from this one buff and this card. Like, that's how potent just splashing Shadow into any deck can be. That uses abilities. So I really feel like this is going to be a major game impactor, almost worse than Mimicking Horror. Like, this is the new Mimicking Horror for a lot of decks, where Mimicking Horror worked with Vine Lash, it worked mostly specifically in Nature, where Nature had the really high hitting buffs that didn't trigger abilities, all that stuff. This one, obviously, yes, trigger abilities, but there are a lot of abilities out there that are worth triggering multiple times in a turn, worth doing all this. Like, it's so good. I mean, exactly, like the White Wolf is saying, Shadow is just too good. Shadow has Shadow Puppet. Shadow has Abyss Tentacles. So, like, putting this in a deck that does that is insane. Like, this card is just going to be so powerful in all decks. That's why I'm saying, like, 4.5 rating. I don't know if it's a 5-star card. It's borderlining 5. Like, it's getting up to a 5.8 or 4.8 for me. Like, it's borderlining that good in just as a card on itself. I don't know how well it's going to impact in the Chimchu family. Like, just using this card as a whole, if you take out the Chimchu card, it's still a phenomenal card. It's still, like, so good that this card is going to see a lot of play. It's going to see a lot of play. It's going to make a lot more combo decks work. It's going to, like, a lot more synergistic. You really want that push damage in there. You really want that going for it. But like I said, you have to build a deck that uses abilities. And a lot of cards out there that are good. I mean, some of them have abilities, some of them don't have abilities. So we'll see how this card changes the game as a whole. But I do feel like, I mean, this card is so good, you're going to want to put 3 of them in there just to make sure you have it in your hand to draw it consistently. This card is just, it's phenomenal. I think it's going to actually break the game at some points. Going to be revolutionary. Some people are going to start playing the Cancel Your Next Attack Exterior Defender from Red just to make sure people don't pull stupid card stuff like this where it's just 1-turn kills. But I mean, this card is just, it's phenomenal. I really enjoy this card. I know for a fact I'm going to be seeing a lot of it. So be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for when Dust Talon Assassin comes out. It's a common card, so everyone's going to have it, and it's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal when it's played against you. Fallen Guardian, Death, Undead. Love it. 2 corners where it doesn't do anything first, then 2 and 2. Damage to your target and reduce damage received by 2. This is awesome. It's 2 damage and 2 damage prevention, so it's like Wall of Bones mixed with a Draga Hoarder. It is undead, so that's what it's got going for it, but mind you, you have to wait 2 turns, so it's something that you have to plan up and wait until it happens. It is only 2 and 2. If it was 3 and 3, I think it would be a lot better, kind of like Shambler. You have to wait 1 more turn for Shambler, but it also gives you that bit of damage reduction. Shambler also got moved to an undead family class, so there's another undead for you to run that deck. Hey, hey. But I mean, I don't feel like this card is going to have that much impact, especially if you want to be aggressive in an undead class. I feel like you do, because undead is very damaging. I don't care about damage reduction. I care about mitigating your hand and dealing this damage to you. So I feel like the Fallen Guardian is not going to have a place, especially over Shambler. Like I just said, Shambler does 2 more damage as a whole in the card. Does it a lot quicker. You can run Wall of Bones in there to beat more damage prevention for 3 turns as opposed to 2 that you have to lead up to. I just don't feel like Fallen Guardian is going to see that much impact unless you're really going heavy on the undead aspect, and you can replace this out for Wall of Bones, get another undead in there, get more damage prevention. But I just don't feel like this card is going to have almost any impact on the game. I'm putting it down as one of my 1-star cards. I hate to say it, maybe 1.5 won't be that critical on it, because it does well. Damage and prevention all in 1 turn. People have played cards like this before that do damage and prevention all at 1 time, and it's found a place. But I just don't feel like right now, or even in the future, the way the games are going to be going, 2 damage mitigation for 2 turns along with the 4 damage is going to be any impactful in the game. It's not going to be a whole lot. You're not going to see this card run over the cards that we have right now. Until all that stuff cycles out, it doesn't have a place. I'm sorry, put my hands up. I'm saying it. It's like a 1-star card. It's not that good. On to the next one. Fortune Master. Fortune Master. 3 no numbers buff. Umbron. Awesome. I love Umbron. I can't wait for this to be a fun family, hopefully. Choose a family. Other heroes cannot play cards or use abilities of that family. I'm going to take a drink because I have a lot to say about this card real quick. So 1 second. This card, I feel, is going to have a major impact on the game with Kindred, especially with all the new families coming out. A lot of people are going to start playing family decks, so having this card be run of maybe like even 2 of in a deck, or just splashing it as a tech card, really can shut down a lot of decks for 3 turns. I mean, just even if they don't run a very heavy deck, you look at all the new cards that have become buff removal. Crystal Leech is now a beast card. Thunderslug is now a beast card. All these cards are now getting families when they didn't have families before. So putting this down to make sure oh hey, I really have to prevent damage prevention, or I really have to prevent them from dealing damage to me. Put this down, and for 3 turns, that family is completely locked out to them, which means that they could be holding dead cards in their hand. Maybe it makes them want to pay for cards for combos with that cards that they initially wanted to hold on to. Firebat is now an elemental. Crystal Bat, I think, is now a beast. All this stuff that's from just Mountain alone are part of families now that can be mitigated or advantageous to. And I think this card is going to be seeing a lot of play in the current meta and in the future meta. I want to say this is going to be a 4-star card. It's nothing that really breaks the game because it doesn't prevent an entire deck from being completely locked down. Unless, like me, you're going to go heavy on the gimmick of families. This card is going to kill me. I'm going to hate it every single time it comes out. But this card, I think, is going to have a really good impact on just the Dread family alone. But mind you, it is Shadow, and Shadow is one of the better ones, like we just saw, to be splashed in, to get the tech cards in there, to get the benefits from all this stuff in it. So I feel like Fortune Master is going to have a really strong impact on the game as a whole for defensive style decks. People are going to want to, like I said, splash this into their sideboard. People are going to maybe even want to run 1 or 2 in their deck just as a tech, depending on how big these families come out. Because it says you get to choose your family. It's not specific ones like the Poison one was where it removes beasts. You choose that family. So you could even have cards out there that have really good abilities on them for a family card. Insect now has some really good attack abilities on their insect cards. The Undead even has attack and defend abilities on some cards and stuff too. So being able to do that with cards out on the field, make it so they can't use the abilities, those cards will just rotate out and it'll be like a dead buff for them. It'll be really good to just hold them back on what they're trying to do. I mean, this will even lock down that one Chimchu. It's hey, use an ability on an activated card. They can't use abilities on those cards because I don't know. I'm not sure how that card will work. Where it's if you play the card, will the buff use the ability because it says you trigger it? I think what happens is when you play that. I want to get the name right here. Whoop! Oh my God! What am I doing? Sorry, guys. 1 sec. Reset this back. There we go. When you lay Dusk Talon Assassin does 3 damage, and then it triggers the ability, which means that the card that has the ability on it, the card is dealing the damage, the card is triggering its ability. So if you shut down a card that's really good for them with this card, Dusk Talon Assassin only becomes 3 damage. It cannot trigger an ability on a card that is essentially dormant. It essentially cannot use its ability. So then that card doesn't have an effect. So I feel like this card is going to have a major impact on the game as a whole with all these new cards coming out, with all these new abilities happening and stuff like that. It's it's going to be a very, very nice tech card that you're going to see a lot of. So I'm going to go 4 stars on it because, I mean, like I said, even if you splash in Shadow, which is one of the better ones to splash in, this card is going to be put in there just for that purpose, just to shut down certain family decks, just to be an annoying person to get you into the late game for the more controlling style decks that I personally love to play. So I cannot wait to see this card in action. I can't wait to see what other people do with it, how they utilize their controlling cards and whatnot. I think this is going to have a really good spot in Dread. I think it's a really well-designed card. Life Leecher, Death card. Defend, 2 healing, 1 damage to your target. Your enemy moves 1 card from their hand to their deck. Now, okay, looking at this as a whole, it kind of reminds me of the Astro card I reviewed last week, where it's 2 healing, 1 damage, you draw a card. So essentially like the complete opposite. 2 healing, 1 damage, yes, but then they put a card back in the hand from their deck. However, I feel like this card, unlike the Chimchu one, that does everything really well, has the Observatory to bounce off it, to empower it, make it do a whole bunch of stuff. This one, I don't feel like is going to have that much of an impact. There's better cards out there. Yes, it has some hand mitigation, but it's only 1 card. 1 card, it could make or break a game sometimes. It could be like you have the perfect hand, they're only down to the last 2 cards, you move 1 back that could have been the killing blow. It could be like you need those cards to pay for a certain combo, and you need to move them back to your deck. I, however, just don't see this card being that critical to the game. I would almost want to see just 2 healing, move 2 cards back, or 1 damage, move 2 cards back, something like that. Where I mean, even Cauldron Wraith was 1 damage if they're below 15, move 2 cards back. This one, it's like, okay, I can heal myself for 2, and then they have to move 1 card without. It could be early game. It could be a really good card early game. Late game, not so much. Really down to the nitty-gritty wire. You only want like 1 of this in your deck. It doesn't even have a family to go along with it. This card, it's trying to do too much. It's trying to be way more general for a class that does very specific things, and I just don't feel like this card is going to be seen a whole lot in play. I'm going to give it a 1.5, not a 1, because it's not a completely dead card. Like I said, it does do a lot of things. Maybe you get increased healing, maybe you get increased damage, all this stuff to make it a little more beneficial for when you lay it. But yes, it doesn't have a family, unlike Cauldron Wraith, which was part of the Undead family. I would have loved to see this be part of a family. Like, I almost want to see these nature people, or even like the Yukona, be actually its own family sometime in the future, to give more families to this class, to bring a lot more fun stuff to this game, which is an amazing game. But right now, I just don't. This card is not going to have a whole lot of play. It's not going to be beneficial. It's not going to be impactful. 1 card is 1 card. It could be better. It could be 2. Over a lot of these other cards, it's not going to see play. It's going to see maybe play in drafts, because it's going to be, oh, hey, mitigation in draft. Awesome. That's where it's going to be seen. Otherwise, it's not an impactful, it's not a powerful card. I hate to say it, but it's like a 1.5 to me. I'm sorry. It's not going to see play. I'm going to put that out there. Wrong way. There we go. Necro Dreadling. Shadow Elemental. Awesome. Burn, 2 healing, move up to 3 action cards from your discard pile to your deck. Okay, this card is going to see a lot of play. I can already tell that right now. The 2 healing is very mitigatable. I don't care. It could just be move 3 action cards back to your deck. That's what the card could read, and I would still play this card. It is an elemental. Elementals are spread across a lot of the things. It has burn, so yes, you can't bring it back, because cards that fetch cards that bring back from your discard pile, are cards that you should not be able to get back. We've seen several problems with that in the past with Awakening and Mythical. Thank you for the word. Yeah, my mind is freaking out. So having those cards get burned, completely reasonable. I love the change that they did that. It makes the game a lot more reasonable, a lot more playable around infinite loops like that. But 3 action cards to your discard pile, back to your deck. I think the only card that comes close to it is the Shadow one, that it was move 2 defend cards from your discard pile to your hand, then you discard a card. Those go to your hand. They're not defend, or they're defend, so it's only kind of healing or buff removal, or maybe not even buff removal really. It's like healing and some other stuff like that. This is just action cards. This could be in a very aggressive style deck where you use all your attacks and they're like, well crap, now I'm out of attacks. No, 1 card for 3 card back into your deck. Get those 3 attack cards back. It is Shadow, which I've stated before. Shadow is one of the best ones to splash into a deck because of all these new cards they're getting, all these tech cards they're getting. This card is gonna see a 5-star rating for me. This card is gonna be so good and so powerful and so universally beneficial in several decks. I mean, even if you're playing it in a deck that wants to go late game, hey, I'm out of healing. I'm out of a certain alignment for my combos. Bring those back into your deck. You get 3 of them to choose from. You get buffs. You get attack. You get defend. You get all these stuff. back into your deck to use later in the game. Be like, oh man, I need more defense, I need more healing or something like that. Bring Bubblefish back, bring Vitalizing Frog back, bring all this stuff that just, I'm only using those cards as an example because everyone knows what those cards are. Bubblefish, who doesn't know Bubblefish, Vitalizing Frog, who doesn't know Vitalizing Frog. But it could be any card like that from a deck. I'm just using these cards as a spout. I'm not saying use it in Storm. I'm not giving my opinion on that. I'm not saying this is only good in blue, use it in blue. But Necro Dreadnought is going to be such an impactful and powerful card in those late game control decks. Mind you, there was, in a Beast Heavy deck, there was the one Poison card that I gave a really bad rating to, the Crude Exterminator. That does not have burn. You could bring that back and get a lot more beast removal out of that in a very Beast Heavy deck, and from what I'm understanding, Beast is a lot more of their buffs. So having that card continues to come back against a Beast deck could just be stupid. You could continuously remove all their Beast buffs and just ruin them with that one card alone. And bringing that card back several times makes this such an impactful card in the game, where you have such a minimal deck. There are cards that have been broken in the game that fetch cards back from your discard pile. Root Singer, Chimchar Infiltrator, all this stuff was given burn. Spirit Gate, you know, all this stuff that brings cards back in your discard pile that are so good. This one, just bring 3 back, is such a crazy card. Like, it could just be 2 healing, bring 2 action cards back to your deck. I would even play it over that. Like, that's how good this card is. 3, I think, is just beyond abnormal. It's ridiculous. You're going to want to run probably 2 of these cards in a deck. Even if you get down to like the very nitty when you're out of deck, hey, 3 cards back. My deck is now 4 cards, 3 of which I know what they are. I know what I want to draw. Like, that's how ridiculous this is. I haven't gone in to see how much of the Elemental family class this could be used in, or like what all Elemental does. But, I mean, just this card alone gets a 5-star rating from me. This is going to be a majorly impactful card on the game as a whole. I mean, Splashless even to Sicario right now. Put like 1 or 2 of them in. Abyss Tentacles are some of the most, like, potent cards of that deck that people are continuously removing them. They're finding ways to continuously bring them back. People run Ghostly Grasp just because it moves 3 action cards back to your hand, and it's a combo, for Christ's sake. This card does the same thing as a combo. Yes, it puts them back in your deck, but all you really want is to bring them back. Like, that's what you want from the card. So having this basically be what that combo does, but it doesn't put to your hand, it puts them to your deck, completely fine. Completely fine. I think this card is going to see major play in the future, in present core decks. It's that strong of a card. I really like this card. I really think this card it should be an uncommon, in my opinion, not uncommon. It's so much more potent than the stat they gave it to, especially with the Dust Talon Assassin. I really think that card should also be an uncommon rather than a common, just because of how potent some of these cards' abilities are and how potent their presence will be in the game as a whole. This card is going to be amazing. It's gonna change the long run game where aggressive, if it can't beat this, nothing will. I mean, the card is just so good. Alright, Poison, Undead, loving this aspect. 4 corners, 1/1/1/3. Corners 1 to 3, damage to your target. Corners 4, damage to all other heroes. Really, with this one, there is, trying to think of the Poison buff that's 3/1/1/1/1 right now. Because, I mean, essentially it's reversed. But I feel like compared... Oh my god, I'm not going to be able to find it in time. One with me, guys, 10 seconds. Like I said, I'm really bad with card names, but I know what the cards do and what to look out for. There it is, Putrid Infestation. So this card is essentially the reverse of Putrid Infestation. Putrid Infestation is now an elemental card, in case you guys didn't know that, so it could be running this. This is an undead card, so if you're going heavy with the family, swap it out for that. The only thing this card really has going for it is win multiplayer. And I really hope, thank you, White Wolf. I really hope this card comes. Do you know like every name in the game? Like, that's ridiculous that you, like, unless you have the page open too, you know all the cards in the name by name, which is awesome. It's awesome. I'm gonna have you on my stream and just give you like, dude, what's the card name? But but yeah, I mean, I really hope that multiplayer becomes a thing, because if it is, this card is going to be run probably a lot. It's going to be really fun to see in multiplayer. And I think the new Dread Poison weapon is the same thing. It does a lot of multiplayer things. I really want them to really start almost pushing the more multiplayer aspect of this game to make cards like this be a lot more fun. I know in the game as a whole, as the card reads right now, there are some cards that were like specific to multiplayer and specific to all this stuff for multiplayer heroes that they just took out of in the game. They just took that out of in the digital game. And I mean, that could be good, because they maybe just want to recode that stuff later when multiplayer becomes more dominant, more predominant. But outside of that, waiting 3 corners until you get 3 damage as opposed to Putrid Infestation, laying it when you want it. I know a lot of them I have the app open for the ones, at least the element stuff, so I can just bring them up Cool, thanks, man. Thanks for finding that out for me. I appreciate that. It's good to have you in the stream. Good to have you here. But yeah, in my opinion, I would want Putrid Infestation over this card because you can time it better from just laying it in your hand. You can get that through the Putrid Shaman out. With this one, it's almost like you have to time it for the big burst damage, lay Putrid Shaman out there so you like your enemy knows what you're doing right off the bat, as opposed to just laying Putrid Infestation for 5 damage when Putrid Shaman is out. So it's one of those that it has its upside, it has its downside. But I really just think this card is not going to see a whole lot of play currently. I mean, if you want to run a better poison buff, run Putrid Infestation. Run Draga Hoarder. Draga Hoarder, in my opinion, is a lot better. It's just 1/2/2/2, so it's like the damage is more cyclical, more throughout than waiting for that burst damage. But yeah, the only reason this card is going to see play is if you play a multiplayer deck, in which case you build a multiplayer deck that just tries to burn everyone down all at once. And I really want to build one like that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. White Wolf says, LOL, I'm multitasking playing some WoW, got my phone on the app in case I need a card for watching your stream on your other monitor. Dude, awesome. Awesome. I love WoW. I wish I could pay for WoW. I'm all the way Horde, so I don't know if you're Alliance or not, but Horde's my main man. But yeah, I just don't think that Spectral or Pestilent Spectre is going to see a whole lot of play over the other cards, so I'm going to give it like a 1.5, where the only 0.5 comes from it being going to be fun in multiplayer. And I really just want to build a fun multiplayer Dread deck because I feel like that's going to be really fun to do. No, your Alliance, no! It's okay. I've been recently trying to play Alliance too, where I have a max character on each one. It's just I've played Horde for a long time, but I'm a WoW lover as a whole. So do what you got to do. I won't tell you how to live your life or who you should like and not like, but I'm glad to see another WoW player in the stream. We'll have to talk about that. Get your opinion on some stuff. But yes, good to have you here. Hopefully you don't leave. Hopefully I'm still got your attention with this card game. We're talking about the card game, man. But yeah, Pestilent Spectre, I'm at 1.5. Only benefit is multiplayer. Not going to see a whole lot of play. Let's go back into this. Next one, Plague Bringer, Shadow. Non-dormant corners for 2. All of the heroes can only take 1 action. Nice. I like it, dude. I like it. So all the players can only take 1 action per turn. Once again, Shadow is getting a lot of the tech cards, a lot of the cards that just can be splashed into a lot of other decks. I personally really like this card. It essentially does what's the hybrid combo, the Storm Dread one, where your opponent can only take 1 action for 4 corners and it deals slight damage to him. I'm sure White Wolf will find the name of it, so I will not bother looking, and I'll just continue talking about this card. Plague Bringer. Only 1 action per turn. This could be really good. It slows down their drawing. It slows down what they're doing to you for just 2 turns, which is extremely beneficial if you're playing a long Poke-style Dread deck where they can't... Chilling Curse. Thank you. See, I told you to get it. Chilling Curse. Thank you very much, White Wolf. For 2 turns, they can only take 1 action until they remove it. So, like, that is very impactful on the game. I mean, if you're going against, obviously, straight aggro, they have to use their first action to remove a buff, or remove this buff. And if they don't, then they can deal 1 action. Obviously, they can still like combos and all that stuff, but like basically cutting their own turn in half for 2 turns is brutal. A lot of people are going to hate this card when it's being played against them. It really slows down your opponent more than just saying, hey, you know, you can't play your defend cards, you can't play attack, all this stuff, because they can still do other things. But literally just taking an entire action away from them could just ruin it. Also, if you read this card and it's like, hey, if you get additional actions, you don't get those additional actions. It specifically states you can only take 1 action per turn. So this shuts down Astral in a hard way, where they're like, okay, fine, well, I'll lay this, get an additional action, use that, wait, what happened to my additional action? Oh, I can only take 1 action, which means anything I earn past that, I don't get. I don't get that. So, like, it's a very impactful card. I'm going to give it a 4-star rating. Just because, yes, it's very good to be splashed in. Yes, it's really good at slowing them down. It only has 2 turns, so like you have to really time out those 2 turns for when you need it the most, which means you're probably going to see 1, maybe 2 of these in a deck. It could be even like a sideboard card where your opponent could be going at the same pace with you, and you don't really care if they only take 1 action. Stuff like that. But it is a very good card, very universally dormant. Part of me wishes it had a family because I really want to see all these cards have new families part of them too. So having this one not be a family means that it can be removed by other stuff, or it could not be removed by other stuff. So like I feel like they could have themized these cards a little better. This card is just a really good card, though. I really like this card. I think it's well designed. 2 corners is completely fine. Really wish it would have had 3, but it would have been a really good card for 3 because, you know, buff removal is going to be a pain. It is going to be a high threat for buff removal. Mind you, when a combo card does what this does twice as good, it's fine for an action card to be this way. But yeah, I just think this card is a really solid card. It's going to see play. It even could see play in like a one-of in certain Sicario decks where you put this out where you have like no cards in hand and all you want to do is use abilities, make your opponent slow their turns down so you can rebuild your hand. It's kind of one of those delay cards where you really want to be able to play catch up. So I really like this card. I think the 4-star rating is perfectly fine with me. Next one. Poised Mercenary. 1 clunky corner with poison. Attack ability. Damage, rotation damage. Remove all poison buffs to the right of this one and increase the damage by 3 for each buff this was removed. This card I could just see being ridiculous. With all the 4-corner poison buffs out there, if you're running a very poison-heavy deck, if you're running that very cyclical thing, you put this out there. For one, it's like, okay, it's only 1 damage. That's completely fine. Then, next turn, you lay Drago Hoarder, Putrid Infestation. They're like, okay, this card is now a 7 damage card, just for playing those 2 buffs on the next turn. You lay another Putrid Infestation. For some reason, you run Pestilent Spectre. You run a bunch of other poison buffs in there that like could just be stupid. You could even run like a Noxus Mantix, 3 damage to your target can't heal. Then you just remove it for 3 more damage. Like, this card has some amazing burst potential, which is what Poison really doesn't have. Poison is very cyclical, very like poke, get all the damage in very minuscule stuff, make your opponent run out. But just like having this at the very start, having this be before all your buffs and whatnot, could just be really dumb. It could be that big threat where it's like, okay, well, I'm only taking 2 damage. Okay, well, I'm only taking like 1 damage this turn. It's not even bypassing a whole bunch of stuff. And then like they just remove 4 buffs. That makes this a 13 damage card. If you have 4 other poison buffs just far out. And Dread is just really good at getting buffs out. Like, it's really good. And like I said, the poison ones, all for the most part, have 4 corners. So getting that with them, keeping those buffs out there for a long time, really makes me think this card is going to be a major impact. The thing is, because it wants you to use so many poison buffs with it, you're not really going to have too many of these copies in the deck. It might only be a 1-of or a 2-of for that final push attack. There's cards in here that I just, the Necro Dreadling, brings 3 action cards back to your deck. So you may want to put like 1 or 2 of those in this poison deck, lay all your poison buffs, get them really high damage, make them use their buff removal. After that, bring those poison buffs back into your deck. Lay Poison Mercenary after the buff removal is all gone. Lay your poison buffs again, and just really drive that damage home. Really knock them dead with like 13 damage from this one card after all of your poison buffs rotated and did all their poison damage. Like, this card I think is going to be, it's what's going to make poison decks viable and really hit home with that impactful, just, you need to be able to have that like 10 plus damage card in a deck, especially like poison. That's, yes, where their poison combos come from, like Toxin Bomb or whatever the card is, where it's 2 poison, deals 8 damage, remove your poison buffs for 2 damage each, so it increases to 12. So like that kind of stuff really just blows it out of the water. So this one is like, it's essentially like that, but it's a action buff. This card can even be brought back from the graveyard by returning poison stuff. So it's like, even if they remove it when you don't have a lot of poison buffs out to just prevent it, bring it back, put it back into play. Be like, okay, what are you going to do now? This could be really bad for you. Even just with 2, like I said, with 2 poison buffs, this is a 7 damage card. That's nuts. That's really good for 1 action card to be able to do that. So I think this card, in my opinion, is going to get... okay, so it can't be spliced into a lot of other decks unless you're running really heavy poison, which in this case, just run a poison deck. Just run Dread. So this card is not going to see a whole lot of cards outside of the color. It really make or breaks a poison deck in a sense that it's one of their big killing blows, along with the combo cards. I'm going to give this a 4.5. I'm going to give it a 4.5 because it is a critical added card to an archetype that was not quite there, that I think this card really helps push it over the limit, where the poison buffs you're going to see this card. You're going to always see this in a very heavy poison deck, maybe even 2 just to make sure you draw it and get it in time. And if they remove it, you have one for later in the game. This card is going to be very impactful. However, like, it doesn't really do anything to your opponent other than give them a threat to watch out for in the near future. It's very easy to play around. But I mean, it's like I said, it's the key card that Poison needed to really push them into the very end of the game, to really drive their wins home. And I think this card, just the reason I'm giving it such a high rating is because just this card, you're going to see the win percentage of those type of decks skyrocket from probably like 40 to 45% to 50 to 55%. Like, that's how much of a gap this one card is going to make in their win percentage. That I think that's why this card gets a high rating, is because this card makes a deck work when it was like on the verge of not being there to being there. Like, it's one of those. So this card is a great card. It's going to be seen, guaranteed. All right, next one. Roaming Zombie. Shadow card, undead, 1/2/2. When another hero draws a card, deal 1 damage to them. I personally love this card. This card could be really fun to play. It's the same thing as Withering. Withering, I believe, is like X2, 3, 4, something like that. It's weird numbers, but it's essentially the same thing. When your opponent draws a card, deal rotation damage to them. So this one, being a action buff, means you get more chances out of it than Withering. You can restart this buff to make it so that your opponent, like, okay, well, to get around this, I just got to lay a bunch of cards, or I just got to remove the buff. Okay, it's like, okay, you laid a bunch of cards, you got around it. Okay, now I'll restart this with something. Now go ahead and start drawing cards. You're going to start taking damage. X334. Thank you. Thank you, White Wolf. That's what Withering does, is X334. Essentially the same thing that Roaming Zombie does. Withering obviously has an X to the first corner, so you can play around it, play your card, or draw your cards then play your cards afterwards. This one is just right impactful on the board. Right away, your opponent has to decide, am I going to start going aggressive? Am I going to start going defensive? Do I start emptying my hand now? Wait till this card's done before I really start refilling my hand? Or do I just take the damage? Do I just draw and take the damage if I really need it, and I'll heal past it? Whatever they're going to do. It's one of those where, like, you can even make your opponent draw cards. I believe the Astral Weapon, the Shard of Gravis, is you draw 2 cards, your opponent draws 1 face up. Right there, using that ability, could make them take 2 damage. Yes, it gives them a card, but it's like, hey, I want you to draw cards. Go ahead, just go ahead and do it. I mean, in my opinion, I've already built a deck around this, and I can't wait to share it on stream. It's going to be a very gimmicky deck, and I love gimmicky decks. I really hope it does decent. I know it won't do well, but if it just does decent, if it wins like 2 games, I'll be happy with it. But I really feel like this card is just, it's a solid core card where, like I said, it slows them down to the point where they have to make a decision about whether they're going to act or whether they're going to stall and draw and take the damage. It can be restarted. It is an undead card for the undead family. Perfect. Love those cards. But I feel like until we figure out how the undead family really rolls out as a whole, this one is probably not going to be seen in a whole lot of undead. Maybe just a one-of for a gimmick. I know a lot of decks out there are really heavy into the card draw. Tempest is draw cards. Selene is move 1 card from your hand on the bottom to draw 2 cards. People run Ancient Miner. People run Spectral Guide. I mean, yes, I'm going with more Mountain and more Astral, but those are the top 2-tier decks. Trianu draws 2 cards on its own. Dolo draws 2 cards. I mean, there's so many cards out there where you just draw, and you want card draw. Where putting this on the field, you'd be like, okay, go ahead, wait till your draw goes out. Like, timing this with an Ancient Miner, they'll draw 2 damage and take 4, or draw 2 cards and take 4 damage. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? This now turns Dolo into you basically hurt yourself for 7 to draw 2 cards. You going to want to do that? Probably not. I mean, this card could see some fun plays, some fun counter plays, but unless you're going really heavy on a gimmick like mine, you won't see it as a core card in a deck. So I'm just going to give this 2.5 to 3 star, anywhere between there, probably 2.5, until we see a lot more people, until we see how more impactful, how many more cards make people draw. Will we not really see how this card can benefit the game? Right now in the current meta, this card could do really well just splash 1 of in a deck for the current meta, because like I said, people run Dolo, people run Trianu, people run Selene, people run Spectral Guide, people run Ancient Miner, people run all these cards to draw cards, and timing this properly with their stuff where it's like inevitable the buff will rotate and they'll draw cards. Yeah, you go ahead and take all that damage when you draw these cards unless you remove this buff. And in which case, like, if they remove this buff just to mitigate that damage, all of your better buffs that you want to lay later will stick on the board. So that's where this card kind of comes in my mind. It's not going to be extremely impactful in the game. It's not going to be one of those game winners. It's just going to be one of those really annoying cards where you have to think, like, is it worth it to draw and take the damage, or should I remove this and potentially get rammed upside down with later buffs? Like, it's just one of those cards that makes your opponent think and go, oh, I'm in a pickle. I'm in a pickle, Rick. What do I do? So I really like this card. I think it's going to be fun to play, but it's not going to have that much impact on the game until we see how much card draw is in the current game, how much it's going to change, and how fast people are cycling through their deck. So that's my opinion. Sacred Mausoleum. Shadow, 1 clunky corner for 2 corners. Instead of discarding, store undead buffs under this card. Defendability, heal for rotation, plus the number of stored cards. Move 1 stored card into play in the rest of the discard pile. Now this could be really fun. Like I said, I feel like undead. 1 second, guys. Sorry, my throat gets really scratchy when I talk for a while, and I haven't been feeling that well, so please forgive me about that. Instead of discarding, store undead buffs. So now I want you guys to remember, when it says discarding, this does not mean discarding from your hand. Discarding is the act of it going basically from the graveyard, from anywhere, from your hand, from the discard pile, or from play. Like, yes, it's expiring, but it's considered discarding as opposed to going to the discard pile. So, like, an undead buff could potentially expire and get put into the discard pile by discarding it, which then means it gets stored into this card. So, like, you could put in the roaming zombie, have that fun action with it, put it into this, defendability, heal for 2, put roaming zombie back out there. Really fun. I mean, there are a lot of other undead buffs. You could put Shambler in here, really go aggressive. Put Shambler. 1 second, guys. I just want to look up the undead buffs real quick. You can put Shambler out there. Play this card as Shambler's about to expire. Shambler goes under there. Use the defendability on it. Put Shambler right back out there. You could put Bone Reaper. Bone Reaper's a good one to put out there. Abyss Hoarder. Use abilities. Draw a card. That one is a really good buff to see. So if they gesture and you have Mausoleum, you don't store the cards. No, you do store the cards. Because discarding from your hand is also considered discarding, which means so if they gesture you, yes, you discard those cards from your hand. They all go under Sacred Mausoleum, and then you get to put one of those into play. The only time it does not count is if it is technically moved. If the card says you move a card to your hand or you move a card to the discard pile, it is not quote-unquote discarding the card. There is the new... Yep, sorry for the confusion there. Grimjow. It does work like that. There is one card that I saw with this last card that I saw that I thought would just be really fun, Roaming Zombie. I looked it up. It's the new unaligned card. Let me look up the name real quick before I start going into this. I want to try and beat the White Wolf to it. Maybe he knows what I'm talking about. The new Crushing Charger. Crushing Charger I read kind of as Creeble Gesture, where if they have 8 or more cards in their hand, what the card reads is they move those cards to their deck, but it does not say they draw 5 cards. It says they move the top 5 cards to their hand. So that does not count as drawing. Probably to get around cards like Roaming Zombie, where if they drew 5 cards, I was going to have this kind of be like a really fun gimmick where it's like, hey, you have 8 cards in your hand because I made you draw all this stuff. Move all of them back, then draw 5 more, and you take 10 damage from this card. But it's like, oh, it reads they move the top 5 cards, so they don't technically draw them, which means you don't get any like Arcana Archaeologist, where if you draw it, you can reveal it. It's kind of stuff like that. It doesn't trigger off of the Crystal Tower, the Tower Defense, stuff like that. Aha! Gotcha! But yeah, the reason they say move is so it doesn't trigger cards that specifically say draw. So yes, when they say discarding, it does mean if you have to discard it through Creeble Gesture. It does mean that if it's like you're discarding it to the what is the other card I'm looking for here? Necrophant. If you discard it to Necrophant, that is considered discarding it because it says the keyword discard in it. I mean, there's a lot of cards out there that just make you discard cards for that stuff. If people lays a greedy gem rough on you, you have to discard 2 cards. You can store one under Sacred Mausoleum, as long as it doesn't have burn, mind you. As long as it does not have burn, you can store the card. So I mean, Sacred Mausoleum is going to be really fun in an undead deck because it revitalizes all of those undead buffs that you want to keep out on the board. It is minor healing, which is completely fine, and all the undead buffs maybe rotate all at once. No, that's very true. That's very true. I haven't given my rating on it, so stick with me here, Grimjow, but I do agree with you on that. I just don't think there's a lot of really good undead buffs, because it doesn't say undead cards, it's undead buffs. Which means that if you go through and you look at all the undead buffs that are out there right now, there's really only like 2 that you'd want to read. Yeah, it does say only store undead buffs under this card. So it does see the keyword buff, which means that it's probably not going to be that good. But if you also think about it, like if you go in like I'm doing right now, and you look at the undead buffs in there right now, you have Abyss Hoarder, you have Bone Reaper, you have the new Covetous Shade, you have the new Fallen Guardian, You have Pestilent Spectre. You have Roaming Zombie. You have Shambler. There's a new one coming out that I'm coming up to called Spectral Widow. There are a lot of buffs in there. I mean, even Shadow Wraith is now a buff, or now an undead card that you can put in there. And Shadow Wraith is just, they can't attack you, you draw one card. And all that fun stuff. So, like, if you're really going heavy on the gimmick of undead, this card could be a one-of in a deck that just is okay. However, like you stated before, there just is not Covetous Shade. Yeah, I mean, for the new set, in my opinion, I think Shambler's better than Covetous Shade. Shambler is X 3 damage, and then it cycles out. Put it back into play for another 6 damage. It depends on the deck style that you want to go to. If you're really going heavy on the aggression for undead, I personally think Shambler is better than Covetous Shade, but Covetous Shade could just be better in the long run. It is poison instead of undead, or instead of death, and all this other things. So like, it really depends on what type of deck you're building. But yes, like you said, there's just not that many good undead buffs in the game. Shade gives you draw that undead doesn't have. That's true. That's very true. Undead does not have a whole lot of card draw. Mind you, you have to wait 4 corners to it, so it could be one of those that, you know, they want to remove, but if you have Sacred Mausoleum out, store that card, put it back out. So, yeah, I mean, that could be very well what you want, is that card draw. In which case, Covetous Shade is a really good card. All depends on how the deck's going to lay out. All depends on how this stuff is going to go. But yeah, getting essentially 4 cards out of that one that you keep bringing back with Sacred Mausoleum, you could bring it back 2 times if you specifically use it with those cards in Junction, and it draws you 6 cards. It could be really good if you think about it that way. Like, all these card interactions that you're going through and thinking about really make this seem a lot more fun. Really much to build a specific deck to run these card synergies and kind of make them all line up and stuff like that. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to play this. But back to Sacred Mausoleum, like we were discussing before, I just really don't think that there are that many undead buffs to make this worth it. Because in some situations, maybe you want just a really good heal, which means you want to be able to store a lot of your undead buffs all at once and have kind of a pick and choose from. Or you could use this as a sense to, like you said, bring back one specific buff 2 times and just have it be that annoying card that kind of cycles through and makes them be really annoying. But it's just, until they make more undead buffs to make this worthwhile, running this card for 1 buff just doesn't seem worth it to me. I mean, yes, you get to bring it back, but we've already discussed how many cards there are to bring back action cards from your discard pile in Dread alone, not to mention all the other cards from other alignments that could make this be just better. Yes, it gets moved back into play, so if there's cards in on Dread, say when this comes into play, you get an action off of it, all this other things. But because this is just so limited to undead buffs alone, not undead cards, but undead buffs, so that they can be put back into play, it really wants me to just give this card like a 1-star rating, because I don't think it's going to have that much impact unless you're going heavy on a gimmick, unless you're going specifically for a certain type of deck, and even in which case you're only going to want to run like 1 or 2 of these cards, because it's not going to be worth it for 2 heal to bring 1 buff back into play when you could bring all these action cards back to your hand, utilize them for combos, you play them again, and all this other stuff. It's just, it doesn't impact the game in a way that a lot of these other cards are impacting the game right now. So this is only going to get a 1-star rating from me, which I really hate to see, because I think the Astral had a lot more better rating than Dread is. And Dread is just such a fun archetype and such a fun alignment that I really don't want to see them have such a heavy swing and balance of cards. There's some really bad and some broken and like unreliable or super reliable. Yeah, 1 out of 5. That's my rating, Grimjaw. 1 out of 5 stars. But yeah, I mean, this card, it does not seem impactful on the game, beneficial enough, especially as I'm going through a lot of the undead cards that are going to be good, are mostly the action, attack, and defend cards. I think Blight Wraith is going to see more action. Cauldron Wraith is going to see a lot more better action for undead. Even Corrupted Spirit, 3 damage, draw 1 card, is an undead card. You're going to see a lot of that. As opposed to all these buffs. You're not going to really play an undead deck that runs a lot of the buffs that you want to bring back that you can't bring back in other ways outside of Sacred Mausoleum. There are a lot of other healing cards to store cards under here to make it better for healing too. I mean, there's so many other better cards that do what this card does. I mean, the only thing that I'd say, okay, sorry, Grimjaw, I'll move to the next one. I apologize for ranting on. But yeah, to make this card better, make it 2 or 3 instead of the 1 up there. That's it. Sacrificial Pit. Dread, location. Burn. Move rotation, discard undead cards to your hand. Restart this if you play an Umbron card. For what this card is trying to do, I don't feel like it's going to be that good or impactful of a card. Yes, you get to move a discarded undead card to your hand. Cool, great. There are not a lot of good Umbron cards out there to make this card worth it to restart it. You only get to move one back if it was two. Awesome, extremely good. It is burned, so you can't even bring this back. This card, I just don't think is going to see a whole lot of play. It is going to be a one-of if you really want to go heavy on the undead, but then you also have to put in quite a few Umbron cards to make it so that you can restart and get a lot of benefit out of this buff alone. I think this card is maybe going to get a 2-star rating from me just because to utilize one family, you have to splash into second family, which means you have to have the right cards in time at play. You have to wait 2 corners to get those cards back into your hand. It is only one, not even 2, to move 2 cards to make it really worth restarting this buff and using it multiple times. Depending on how the Umbron cards too, this card it's not going to see a whole lot of impact. And I think the starter deck comes with 2 of these, which makes me think this card would have been great to see a lot of. Exactly, it's so specific. You have to utilize 2 families in one deck. In 30 cards, you're not going to have that many cards you want to bring back. It's a late game card that does not do enough well for the late game. It's only going to get a 1-star rating from me, and it's one of their rare cards, which is really sad to see. But I mean, we'll see. Maybe this card is actually going to be a lot better than I think, and Undead and Umbron can be utilized and splashed into a lot of other things. Yeah, exactly. Unless Umbron is going to be an amazing set, I just don't think this is going to be a really good card to see. Yeah, I completely agree. On to the next one. Skeletal Rider. Death. Consistent buff. Attack ability. 2 damage, and you suffer 2 if you've played an undead card this turn. I mean, I think this might just be a solid card. It could be even a one-of in just an undead deck. You cycle through all the undead cards, draw your cards, get this buff out there. It's not really a threatening buff where they want to remove it. It is just 2 damage and 2 healing. You have to lay an undead before. So, like, if you lay an undead, use this ability, that takes your whole turn. But, I mean, it's just more consistent damage if you don't have a lot of the damage. This one card could potentially be, like, 8 damage, 8 healing if it stays on the board long enough, if you use those undead cards. And like we were saying, the undead buffs are not the best cards to lay. It's some of the attack and action cards. So, like, just consistent undead damage could be really good. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give this. I am gonna only give this a 2.5 star rating. It is kind of only a worse Night Lurker. I mean, yes, you get the healing with it, but you have to play a card beforehand in order for you to be able to trigger this ability. Well, actually, no. It says 2 damage, period. Heal yourself for 2 if you put it on an undead card. So this essentially is Night Lurker. You get an extra benefit if you just deal, or if you put an undead dam. So I mean, this card is essentially Night Lurker, but better if you laid an undead card. But Night Lurker is also a lot better because you can remove your own buffs. You can remove Soul Trader. Could be good like that. You could remove poison buffs that did their thing and get better benefit out of it. So it's like, I still think Night Lurker is better. In my opinion, Night Lurker is way better than this. I don't even think there are a lot of cards that run Creeble to utilize this in a Creeble family. Obviously, it wants to be used in an undead deck anyway, so the Creeble doesn't really matter that much to me. This card it's really only going to get like a 1-star rating compared to Night Lurker, because it's just a worse Night Lurker in my opinion. Night Lurker does this stuff way better, and it is Shadow, which Shadow is more beneficial than Dead anyway, or than Death. So this card is 1, maybe 1.5 if you really want to run an undead deck and don't want to run Night Lurker. I don't know. That's my opinion. It's not going to see a whole lot of play over the current cards. It just really isn't. It's not. It's not. Next one. Spectral Widow. Poison, undead. Okay, we got more undead buffs. Cool. 2/2/2. Damage to your target. This bypasses damage-reducing effects and cannot be increased by effects. When I first saw this card, I was really anticipated about this card. I was really excited about it, going, wow, you know, it bypasses through the damage reduction. It's awesome. It's going to be that killing blow card, kind of like Sneaky Creeble was. But at the same time, I also read this cannot be increased by effects, which means you cannot run Putrid Shaman with this and get like 4 damage bypass, then 5 damage bypass after you lay him on the same turn. This card is just, in my opinion, is not strong enough to be worth playing over a Sneaky Creeble, which A, does the same thing. It does 4 damage, an attack card that bypasses damage reduction, and can also be increased by effects. Like, if this card could be increased, this card would be a great card to run. But in my opinion, I've tried running it. I've tried running a poison-style deck with all this stuff, and it bypasses damage-reducing effects, which means when you really want it to get in for the final 2 damage, cool. But there are so many other cards that do that. There's so many like just high, more valued cards, and I don't think this card, which is really sad to say because Spectral Widow its design is really cool. Bypass and damage reduction is what Dread wants to do. It's what Poison wants to do. Get past all your, oh, you can't, get past my wall. It's like, no, I can. For the next 3 turns, I can get past your wall. But it is just 2 and 2 and 2. I would really like to see this even like a 1, 2, 3, something that ramps up the damage to really make your opponent more threatening. Like I said, be able to increase by effects would make this card a lot more playable. But this card as itself it's really only a 1.5, and I'm being very serious about that. You'll try and run this card and you'll try and see it, be like, oh, this is really cool. But then it's like, oh, they're maybe at 5, and which means they have to wait 3 turns till this one kills them, which gives them a chance to heal or do something to you to kill you. When you bypass damage reduction, that's when you want to get the final blow. You want them to feel like their wall is what's going to protect them, and then you go, nope, your wall, it's not even there. I'll hit you in the face for 4 or 6 or 7 or whatever you want to do. In this one, it's just like, oh, you have a wall there, cool. Well, you're going to still die in 3 turns, which means you have 3 turns to find a way out. Yes, there is a new combo that brings 4 undead buffs back from your discard pile, which in this case could be good. Like we've been talking before, there are cards that utilize undead buffs. So maybe this card is good in synergistic with other cards, but just as the card as a whole, if you're looking at the card plain out right, Sneaky Creeble is way better than this card, and it's even unaligned. But if you, like I said, if you are running a very heavy undead buff deck, this card is good. It could be fun. Maybe I'll bump my rating up to a 2 just for that. If you're running an undead buff, bringing this card back with that one, with the combo that brings 4 undead buffs back, bring back 3 Spectral Widows. 6 damage, that's when it starts really overrunning your opponents, when you have multiples out in a turn. But at the same time, if you're laying that combo, you're going to want to maybe bring other undead buffs back from the graveyard, get them all stored from Mausoleum. It's like one of those decks where like all the cards have to be out at the right time, which means that you have to be waiting that game to be able to benefit from this. So it could be really good, could be really bad. It's one of those that we won't really know until the undead decks get solidified. See, things like Mateship, Mateship is 1 massive damage on 1 turn. So like if we're comparing it to Mateship, you put a wall up. This is Mateship. Yes, will bypass with 4 damage. This will bypass with 6 in 2 turns. But it is a very heavy hitting card. If this one was XX 5 or 6, then I think it would be more comparable to Mateship. But because it is poison, it is very cyclical in that sense. I am trying to compare it to stuff where you kind of get the sense of what those big burst damage cards do as opposed to the cyclical cards do, where yes, what's going to happen in a big way where you have those turns, but this one is the same way. It's just slow mitigating damage. So it's like, okay, I can take 2 and 2. It's even like if you're running tech, you'll take the 2/2 damage to get past this up, then you're below 10 or below 15 and can do something beneficial from it, as opposed to having this be that one solid hit at the very end, which you could pile on it all in 1 turn. So I feel like comparing this to Mateship isn't that fair in that sense, if you're kind of understanding where I'm coming from with this, because Mateship, like you said, is XX7, 1 big swing in 1 turn, pile that on with a combo, pile it on with all this other stuff. Yes, you can wait, 2/2/2 and wait for that final corner to then do a massive pile. It's kind of in that sense. If Mateship gets reduced to anything, Spectral Widow is better. True. Very true. With Mateship, you can wait till that final turn, lay a wall down. You get think about it this way: if you put Mateship out there, and they lay Moss Ridge Defender, which prevents 3 of it, that will deal 4 damage on its final corner. This will deal 2 more damage over the course of the turns. Yes, in that sense, yes. It's very all situational. It all depends on what kind of wall they have up. You could also run. What am I trying to think here? The Colossi artifact that makes it so the action cards can't deal more than 4 damage. Essentially the same thing. It would do 2 more damage over the long run. Which, if you're thinking about it that way, yes, comparing it is more damage from 1 action card better as opposed to Mateship. But I'm not trying to say we're both right or both wrong or whatnot. I'm just trying to say I'm comparing this to more cyclical damage, whereas Mateship in my mind is more of a heavy hitting 1 turn, which you can then pile on. Whereas this one is turn after turn after turn damage, which is kind of what I'm trying to compare it to with turn after turn after turn damage. That could just be increased or better. I hope I'm trying to get my point of view across. I'm not saying you're wrong or you're right. We both have obviously opinions of this, and I'd love to discuss it more with you, Grimjow. By the way, love the name. Bleach is an awesome anime. I love it. But that's kind of where I'm going from with this. I feel like almost comparing Draga Scorcher to Mage Ship would be more comparable. Yes, it's one more turn or sooner, 1 damage less. Yeah, no, I mean, being able to restart this card also is great. If you run in a deck that restarts a lot of the cards, which I think a lot of the restarts come from Nature, if I'm not mistaken. I think Nature has a lot of the restart your buffs. And put it in Nature, this will be amazing in Nature. Nature also has very cyclical damage, Insect Swarm, Poke for 1, all that other stuff. So yeah, splashing this into another deck would be great. You don't even need it for the Undead. You could just use it for the bypassing damage. But yeah, I mean, it like I said, I could be completely wrong on my rating. Yeah, Bleach. Grimjaw's one of my favorite villains. It's so good. But yeah, I mean, the reason I'm not completely in love with this card is specifically for the fact that you cannot be increased by effects. I wish it could be increased by effects. Like, I would even take a 1/1/1 that could be increased by effects that still bypasses damage. That card would be amazing to me. That card I would love to run. Get that really big burst damage in there with stuff like Putrid Shaman, Colossi Ritual Site, all this other stuff that makes it so that you really get that heavy bypassing damage reduction stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you put this in a deck where you restart your buff to get it in, that's 6 more damage that bypasses over several turns. Maybe that's all you really want. So yeah, I mean, this deck, or this card, could be really good. Like I said, my opinion is not the all-state, all in concrete, written in pen, permanent decision. Just from what I'm seeing about the past meta, about what this card does as a whole, yeah, no, it would be pretty OP. Which is, like I said, why Crude Infiltrator, I think, is a better bypassing card than this, because that one can be increased to like 7 damage that just bypasses and kills you in 1 hit when they get down to that low. I mean, that's personally why I love it, is because it can be increased. If this one could be increased, I would love this one so much more. But as it states, there's so much going on in this card that I wish, in my mind, I could see better benefits of it. If you look, like Grimjaw was saying, if you look for restarting the buff, awesome. This one is way better. If you look for the undead buffs, bring it back onto play, way much better. Like, it has to be in those specific decks. And in which case, the card rating is very situational, which means the rating will jump. Yeah, it could spike. It could be like a 4-star card. But that's just me. I give it 2 stars until I find out a perfect place for it. I think this is kind of a set-aside card that I'm waiting to find the deck to splice it into. That's where I'm going on the card. So I hope you guys understand my rating on it. Would love to see this play more. I would love to see all these cards played. All right, next card. Tombstone Carver. 1/1/1. Whenever a card from another hero is moved to the discard pile, that hero takes 1 damage. This card, I feel like, is on the same power level as Roaming Zombie. It's up there between 2.5 and 3, because whenever you kill one of their buffs, that buff is moved to the discard pile. Whenever you make them discard a card, it's moved to the discard pile. So, like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I wish it was got mixed better. Dude, White Wolf, thanks for stopping by. I will have this uploaded to YouTube so you can watch it later. Hope you enjoy it. Leave some comments. Give my opinion, your opinion. I'd love to keep talking about this with you guys, because I love this game and I love talking about it with you guys. It's so awesome. Tombstone Carver, like, I feel it's the same level as Roaming Zombie, where it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. Should I lay a card? It'll go to the graveyard, I'll take a damage for laying a card. Should I not lay a card? Like, hold back my turn. It's kind of one of those situational, where if you, obviously, the best play in the world would be lay Tombstone Carver, lay Roaming Zombie. Hey, if you play a card, you take a damage. If you draw a card, you take a damage. What are you going to do? Sounds good, man. See you later, White Wolf. But yeah, it's one of those cards that I just feel like it's an annoying card. It's not going to see some major impact. Obviously, you could run it with Putrid Shaman and increase it for whenever they play a card, which in the case makes you go, okay, well, now I guess I'll just draw, which means the Roaming Zombie also gets increased. So it's kind of stuff like that, where it's a nuisance card, but it's not going to be an impactful card. It's just going to be one of those where your opponent just kind of goes, oh god, really? I have to do this now? So I'm going to give it like a 2.5 star rating. I obviously play this card a lot. I love stuff like that, where your opponent just goes, like, kind of rolls their eyes at you and go, I know, right? Have fun! But yeah, it's not going to have that much impact on the game. Depending on the deck, maybe you're playing against Astral and they're gonna I have 5 actions in a turn. It's like, okay, cool, you took 5 damage this turn. Cool, nice job, buddy. But even if it's like they lay a buff, It's not moved to the discard pile, so they didn't take a damage. They laid a card, got around it. So that's what you kind of got to do. That's kind of how I look at this. If you get something like Colossi Artifact or one with Nature will use Gesture too much damage if they have a big hand. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could just be ridiculous. It could be gross. Make them draw a whole bunch of cards, make them discard a bunch of cards. It could be a lot of fun. There could be a certain, like, just really synergistic deck that just messes with your opponent's hand, and you just go, ha ha ha, fun. Yeah, I could love this card being played. I want to make a gimmick deck around it, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I hope you guys will enjoy it when I do. Cool. On to the next one. Umbron Necrolord. So Shadow, Umbron card. 1/1/1. When you may move one valid undead buff from your hand into play. So how I'm reading this in a general sense is every turn you get an additional action, but you have to use that action to, it says move. So it's not even like you're really playing it. I mean, essentially you are, because when it comes into play you get to do it, but you move an undead buff from your hand into play. So it's an unrestricted action, but it's so restricted to the fact where you have to lay undead buffs. And even if you don't have one, it's a dead buff. Which is really sad, because this is the third rare, it's the Shadow rare buff. The Death and Shadow ones are just, they're not really impactful on the board unless you play a very, very heavy undead deck, which in case you want to also splice in Umbron. So I'm like, until that deck gets flushed out, I don't see this being a very impactful card. Yes, you get to lay extra cards in your hand, but then also there's not a whole lot of card draw outside of Covetous Shade, which is not even card draw immediately. And it has to be a buff. It can't just be an undead card. So like you can't even use that action for an undead attack. I think this is only going to get a 2-star rating from me. Yes, it's 4 turns. You can restart this buff if you want. You can bring it back because it doesn't have burn. But it's so specific on the fact where it has to be an undead buff, which means they're really going heavy on the undead buff thing. So until they really start fleshing out a lot of these really good undead buffs, we start seeing a deck that runs a lot of undead buffs. I don't know how to rate this card. If you bring out Tentacle with that, you don't get the additional action, right? Because actually Tentacle is not an undead, it's an elemental. So you can't even bring Tentacle out with this. But yes, if you did, if this card did say you could bring it out, it would technically be moved into play, and Tentacle reads as this comes into play. Because let me go back up here and read Tentacle real quick. Because Tentacle does read when this enters play. It's not when you play it, it's when it enters play. So if you move it into play, it's still coming into play. So you would get the additional action off of it, but Abyss Tentacle is an elemental. It's not an undead, which means you can't even put it into play with this card. So like, until we figured out the really good fleshed out undead buff deck, this card to me just reads, you get a third action that is very restricted. The only benefit of it is if you are running a hero that does not have mastery over a lot of elements, you could lay 2 death cards in a turn. Or you could lay 2 poison cards in a turn with this. That's kind of how I'm reading it, but it has to be an undead buff. Can't be an undead action card or an undead attack or defend. It has to be a buff. So like, that's why I'm only giving this a 2-star rating. Very specific deck it has to run into. I mean, I haven't even looked to see what other undead there is outside of Dread. Maybe this card is just really good. Like, yeah, I'm not even seeing. There's one undead buff outside of Dread, and that's in Nature. So I mean, like, even if you place it in Nature, it wouldn't be that beneficial for you. So I really feel like this card it's very underpowered right now. It is an Umbron card. I don't know how the Umbron family works a whole lot right now until I start diving into it. This card is only going to get a 2-star rating from me. What it does, or what it's trying to do, it does really well, but it's very situational. And until we figure out how much card draw comes into this deck to use it vitally, I don't see this card being run of, maybe even more than a 1 of. And even then, it's not, looking at the card, it's not even a threat for buff removal. So like, you can't even use it to try and make your opponent kill it to then lay a better buff later on. It's just there's a lot going on that I don't feel like it's really fleshed out yet along with the cards. So maybe in later sets it will be, but right now for me it only gets a 2-star rating at most. It's possibly lower than that for me, just because of what it's trying to do. It just doesn't do it well enough. All right, next one we have Umbron Sergeant. Umbron card. Reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. Move all Umbron cards to your hand. Put the others back in the same order. Gain healing equal to the number of Umbron cards revealed. This card, like, hold on, let me take a look to see how many Umbron cards there are. So there are 14 total Umbron cards, 2 of which are in the Mountain alignment. a lot of which are also unaligned. So running unaligned cards, you probably don't want to run too many of those because you want to be able to have your alignment to pay for combos and whatnot like that. And even the cards that you are running look all very tech and situational cards. So unless like your entire deck is all tech cards, to like really play around a lot of the stuff, this card it's gonna get a 1-star rating from me. This is just, I mean, yes, you get to look at the top 3 cards in a Dread deck. I don't know how beneficial that is. There's not a whole lot of stuff that runs like Astral where you can look at the top card and rearrange it. You only get 1 healing for every Umbron card. There's a tech card in there that does the same thing, Tyrex Engineer, that reveals the top cards, and you get 3 healing per card. Mind you, I don't think you draw them, you just kind of reshuffle your deck or put them back or whatever, but like 1 healing, 1 card draw. Essentially what this card is going to read is, look at the top 3 cards. Either do nothing, or depending on how you built your deck, you draw 1 card, heal for 1. Out of 1 defend card. Not good, not at all, because all the Umbron cards that you're going to put in there are, like I said, be very situational. You're not going to run a whole lot of them. The best you can get, draw 2 cards, heal for 2. I'm shaking in my boots. Oh boy. Like, it's not going to see a whole lot of play compared to all the other cards that are in there. And until Umbron gets fully fleshed out, this card is just not going to be good. It's a 1-star card for me. When you see it in draft, you're probably not even going to pick it in draft because you're like, it revolves around Umbron cards. I don't care. I'm not running a whole lot. Is it banned? I thought it's probably banned in like tournament. But on the app, it's refixed so that it can be played in casual or on the app. A lot of the things that are banned can still be played on the app because they reworked it digitally. But yeah, Tyrex Engineer is banned, which I think they came up with a new tech card that essentially does or tries to replace what that card does, because like doubles the healing of a certain card that you lay or something like that. So but yeah, even Tyrex could heal you for like 12. You look at the top 4, obviously it's been reworked now to the top 3, so it can heal you for 9. Could be really good. This one only heals you for 1. It is such a downgrade from that card. It's just very bad. And it has to be a certain family, which is not fully fleshed out yet. I think it's one of the least fleshed out families next to Kriebel. What it does in the app, so basically you take a look at the card, what it is right now, what the app downgraded it to, instead of look at the top 4 cards, it's just look at the top 3 cards. Same benefits all around, same healing for the same mechanical, stuff like that. It's just you draw 1 less card. That's how they fixed it in the app, which is how it personally should have been. All the other cards are draw 3, this is draw 4, which is why it got banned, because you could heal for 12, and that's a little ridiculous in some decks. But yes, Grimjaw, that's how it got fixed in the app. I know cards like Pollen Weaver got fixed in the app too, so it's banned in the physical card, but not banned in the app, so you can still use them like that. But yeah, Umbron Surgeon, I really don't feel like it's a fully fleshed out family yet for what it wants to do. This card is a 1-star card right now, and it's not going to see play in the past, in the future, and maybe way in the future, and when Umbron finally becomes a good family to play. But until then, it's not worth it. Next card, Umbron Terror Guard. Umbron card. Death. You are immune to damage while you have 10 or less health. Draw 1 card if this buff expires. This card, I really don't know how to rate this card because, like I said before when I was doing the hero reviews, Morgok is a card that this one really wants to run. But what's really funny is Morgok does not have access to death. So you have to put the death weapon in there. Because it's when you're below 10 and you deal damage, you heal for 2. Cool. This one makes it so that when you're below 10, you pretty much can't die, essentially what it means. And then for 2 turns, then it draws a card when you expire. So it's a good card, but at the same time, Path to Affiliate means that it's one of the things on Twitch where if you get a certain number of followers, you go up in a ranking on Twitch so that you can do more things on that. You can host people, you can auto-host people, you can do a bunch of other stuff. It's essentially, the affiliate's the next step up from a starting Twitch streamer. Once you get to affiliate, then I think like the more followers you have, you go to the next ranking, and so on and so forth, and you become more noticed by Twitch, where they will then have moderators, they'll get your name out there, and they'll start making you more of a real streamer. But they want to make sure they're not wasting their time on people who only have like 3 people watch them at all times. It's kind of one of those things where your path to affiliate is the first step that you want to try and reach as you start streaming on Twitch. And I've only started about almost a month ago now. I probably won't hit it this month, but it's within a 30-day span. You have to get 50 followers so that they know that people are continuously watching you. You are growing as a brand is what they're trying to do. That's what affiliate means. So I hope that answered your question. You can probably read into it more on Twitch if you want to start Twitch streaming. I'll be more than happy to help you. I know I'm helping. D Maloney wants to start, and I'm helping with that too. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm here to help you guys. I want this game to be more viable, more people to watch it online, so that we can enjoy the game together. But yeah, Umbra and Terror Guard. I just, for what it is, it could be fun just to spice in. I mean, forget about the Umbra family, forget about all that stuff. It could be like one of those cards where you're continuously run down by mitigating damage, by spell damage, and once you're at 10, lay this card. Can't be killed for 2 turns. On the Twitch, there should be a follow button at the top. Trying to think if I'm here. Top corner of the stream should be like a follow button. You can hit the follow up there. Follow me. It'll also, I think, give you you can sign up for notifications for when I go live. It'll send you like a little thing on your phone or a little, however it does, say, hey, he's going live, or hey, he just went live, come on, watch him like that. So that kind of thing is how you can follow and support the streamers. Obviously, subscribing means you pay a monthly fee to keep following us and stuff like that, but I would not recommend that right now until we actually become, just follow. Follow is good. Follow is what a lot of people would do, and just kind of support the stream, saying, hey man, I like cut of your jib. Kind of one of those things. But yeah, Umbra and Terror Guard. I'm going to give it a 2-star rating. It's a very tech choice card, because a lot of cards out there that deal more than 10 damage. A lot of cards just really kill you from like 12 or 13, where you have to be below 10. 10 is a really dangerous zone anyway. 12 is a dangerous zone, and that's even above 10. So like this card, it could do nothing. I mean, people could get you down to 12, and you never be able to really lay this card to get the benefit from it, because they just kill you the next turn for 16 damage. And you're like, wow, that was cool. So it's one of those where situational, maybe you have to play around it. Yeah, we'll see how the meta goes. If it's more cyclical damage like Poison is going to be, then maybe this card has a chance. Maybe you lay it out there when you're above 10 to get you into 10, and then they can't do any more damage to you. Kind of one of those cards that you have to kind of work around. So yeah, we'll see how this card goes. We'll see how it goes. But right now it's a 2-star rating for me, because a lot of cards out there just deal massive amounts of damage to you. It just really, really slugs you in the face for one final hit. Is how most of these games have been going from what I'm seeing. So that's my rating on it. All right, last one I believe to tell the weapons. Veil Rider. Restart all of your undead buffs. Now this one, as we've been talking, it would be really good to restart the undead buffs that are out there. Really go into that heavy undead gimmick and whatnot. So this one could be just a really good card for an undead deck. I mean, your Spectral Widows are out there. You can time it really well, so it's not like the turn there at the last corner you restart it. Grimjow, thanks for the follow, man. Thanks for supporting the stream and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Get that little notification under there. Really like that ad. But yeah, I mean, this card could just be really good for your undead buffs. You restart all of them. A lot of them have 3 or 4 corners, so timing it is not that difficult to do. It could even be beneficial just to restart 2 buffs for 1. That's how good this card could be in an undead deck. But personally, this makes undead decks so much better than just making it with undead cards. If you're going to build an undead deck, I would run at least 2 of these cards in it. I'm going to give this card a 4-star rating for undead alone, just because, like we've been discussing through all these other cards, it's really good. This starts with a V, so it's in alphabetical order. That with your undead buffs, you want them to stick out there. You want them to be out there all the time. So being able to just restart your undead buffs. I like your content. A big is fan, and maybe I'll stream like you one day. Awesome, man, dude. That's awesome. I can't wait to see what you got going. If you ever want to start streaming, like I said, when Kindred comes out, I have a feeling the whole thing is going to blow up, because there's going to be such a variety to the game that if you want to start, I'll help you out. I'll help you kind of get the basics of it, and just feel free to ask me any questions. I'll be more than happy to help you. I want more people to start streaming so we can have a better community online about it. So awesome. Thanks for joining, man. Hope to see you out there. But yeah, I mean, just restarting like 1 or 2 undead buffs as you're laying them to get them all go to the same corner, all start out at once and start doing more things. So this is where the Spectral Widow comes into play. Maybe it's a lot better with this card. Get 2 of them out there. Start doing 4 and 4 and 4, bypassing damage. As it adds up, how Dread does it, it wants it to add up. So having all of your buffs like about to die off, and then rotating them all real quick and have them go all at the same time, could be the major turn swing that you really want. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to give this, like I said, a 4-star rating, because it's a card that, like the Poison one does, it makes or breaks an undead deck. If you don't get it, your undead deck is probably not going to do the best it can do. With this one, it's going to make your undead deck just be ridiculous. Being able to restart all your undead buffs to do it is going to make that big swing turn that you want to finally push through to the end of the game and kill your opponent. So that's why this card is getting a better rating for it. The Nature Undead buff is, I want to say it's like the Soul of War, or not Soul of War. Yeah, Soul of War. I was right. It's Soul of War. 1/1/1. Draw one card. Basically, draw rotation cards when you take one or more damage. So for 3 turns, if anyone deals damage to you, you get to draw a card every time someone deals damage to you. It's a really good card. You can, however, fall into an infinite loop with the undead card Roaming Zombie, where if they have Soul of War, you have Roaming Zombie. They draw a card. Roaming Zombie deals the damage to you, which then triggers Soul of War, which then draws them a card, which then deals the damage, and it kind of goes in a cyclical thing, and they just die. That's how it happens. They die, or they keep taking damage until they run out of their deck. They draw all their hand, but they take, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 as they draw cards. It's a really fun combo. I've seen it happen online with Withering and Soul of War, but now the Roaming Zombie's in there, it's going to be a lot more potent, a lot more easy to access, and it's going to make it a really fun actions with nature. And I'm probably going to be able to see that more than once with those combos. So look out for that. Be on the lookout. But yeah, I mean, Veil Rider, I feel, is one of the cards that makes or breaks on dead decks, and just because of that card alone, that's why it gets such a high rating, is because this card solidifies a deck archetype all on its own. Yeah, it's a card that's going to make it better than what it really should be, in my opinion. So I guess we got one more, Vile Breath Hexer. Then we're on, no, we got 2 more, and then we're on to the weapons. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I jumped ahead. Vile Breath Hexer, a creeble card, X, clunky corner. Your target cannot receive healing. Instead, deal damage to them equal to any healing they would receive. Draw 1 card when this expires. This card, I think, is just going to be a really good card. Like I said, especially in Poison. With Poison, it's the archetype that makes them not want to heal, makes them really want to hold back on their stuff. A lot of the healing cards out there heal for like anywhere between 4 and 7. So like, A, it doesn't heal them, and B, it hurts them when they heal. So they have to remove this buff. But if they don't, if they lay Boulder Feast or Vitalizing Frog or anything like that, they take 6 damage, and then you draw a card. When this buff expires, you draw a card. So like, that stuff is just ridiculously synergistic. One thing that I found with it, and I'm sure once I say it, probably a lot of people will do, is splash this into blue and lay Confused Shaman. So when this rotates, what Confused Shaman reads, if you guys don't know, you heal for 7, and then you heal another player for 4. So what this will do, essentially, is you'll heal for 7, your target will take 4 damage, this will rotate, drawing you a card. That's an 11-point swing, and you draw a card with Vile Brew Hexer. Like, that itself is, like, really good card synergy. Mind you, they're in 2 alignments, so you gotta splash it in either way, but, like, that could be so much fun. That could be a lot of fun, just to, like, try and make it so your opponent heals, or, like, doesn't heal. I think Vile Brew Hexer gets a 4-star rating for me. It's not, like I said, it doesn't make or break a deck, it doesn't make the game incredibly stupid, but it's one of those where they get low, and they're like, okay, well, now I'm low enough where healing is probably beneficial. You lay Vile Brew Hexer out there, and go, okay, well, I'm going to kill you in, like, 2 turns with all this cyclical damage. You can't heal, because if you do, you're going to just take that damage instead of healing through it. What are you going to do? I mean, maybe this card run with the Spectral Widow is what really makes those 2 cards work, where it's like, okay, you can't lay a wall, because the wall, my Spectral Widow will go through it. You can't heal, because if you heal, you'll just take damage. So what are you going to do? What are your options here? You have to race me to the death before I kill you. So that's why this card, I think, is a really good card, really good situational card. Put it into other, it's good on its own, where you can put it into other decks and make it work. Make it work just fine, because it prevents your opponent from healing. That's essentially what it does. So yeah, I think this card is going to be a great card. It's going to see a lot of. It's going to get a 4-star rating from me. It's a solid card on its own, and I think it was a card that the game needed to have to obviously prevent your opponent from healing. There's Creeble Potion Master that does that, but this literally just makes it so they take damage instead of healing. It doesn't mitigate the healing. They literally take damage, which is a huge backswing. It really prevents them from wanting to even try to heal. So that could be fun. Even putting this in Triano. Like, think about it. You draw 2 cards, Triano heals them for 3, which then makes them deal 3, which then draws you another card. So it's like, you take 3, I'll draw 3. That's pretty fun. That's pretty fun in my opinion. That kind of stuff is just really, really fun ways to play with the card. Alright, last one, I promise. Then we're going on to weapons. I'm looking at the board right now, just looking at it. So, Watch Rest Trader. We have 2 clunky corners, 1 and 2. When you play an Umbron card, deal rotation damage to your target and draw a card. Like we discussed before, I personally don't think that Umbron is a really fleshed out archetype yet. A lot of the Umbron cards that I'm seeing are very tech and very situational. You're not going to want to run an entire Umbron deck. Mind you, saying that, when the game comes out, I will try to build an Umbron deck entirely, just to see how it works, just to see what it does as a family. Really get that gimmick going for the family. So I will find out eventually whether this card is good or not. But in my opinion, this is just, it's a card that they made to try and really flush out Umbron as a family. But it's just, it's a meh card. It's a 1.5 rating, and that's probably generous for me. Because it's a buff out there. Yes, it's continuous, so you don't have to race to get the Umbron cards out there. It draws you an additional card when you lay an Umbron card, which potentially, maybe this card is really good in that Shadow Umbron deck that you really want to lay your Umbron cards, draw those cards, which is what Death or Undead really needs. So maybe that's why a good balance between Undead and Umbron is really good. Umbron helps you draw your cards, cycle through them. Your Shadow cards make it so that you do the damage. Maybe that's the good passage between the two families, that they don't really separate, they more coincide and work together. So maybe that's how the deck is supposed to be built. In which case, this could be a lot better card than I think. But in my opinion, it's a 1.5 card. You need Umbron to be able to make it work, which means it can't be splashed into other stuff like the other cards. Yeah, it's 1-2 damage, but then you draw one card. Cool. Card draw is awesome, like I said before, but it requires Umbron. So we'll see. We'll see if Umbron becomes more viable with cards like this. But right now, it's not appealing to me. It doesn't feel like it's going to fit anywhere unless it's a specific deck. And even then, maybe run one of, because if you run two of and you draw the second one late in the game, this card is going to be dead. It's a dead card. You're only going to want one of it in the deck, so it's not even going to be that beneficial. So that's my take on it. 1.5 star. Hope I'm wrong. Hope we find a deck where this just like rocks the world out of everything. But yeah, I mean that's my take. 1.5. All right, on to the weapons. Scroll of Yama. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Y-I is very Yama, something like that. Shadow. 1, so it's not supremacy over it. 1 slot rating. Attack ability. Discard 1 undead card from your hand to deal 5 damage. Now, this is the weapon I was referring to back at the Mausoleum, where a discarded defend or undead buff goes under this card. It is an ability, so you can't trigger them both in the same turn unless you use the Chimchu card, the Dusk Talon Assassin, to trigger the abilities. So, this card, I feel, is going to just be a really good card in an undead deck. It's not going to give you mastery over Shadow, or supremacy over Shadow, so like you're really only using it to be able to make your undead buffs, which there's what they're trying to go for, into just 5 damage cards. Could be great. Get those undead buffs to your discard pile, then lay your combo to bring 4 undead buffs back. Like, this could be a really good card in an undead deck. Because, like I said, the buffs are the major undead part of the thing. Turns those buffs into 5 damage if you really need it late in the game, or you can just bring them back, or by storing them into the Mausoleum. This weapon, I feel, is a 4-star weapon. Just because it turns any undead card you have into a flame bat, Noxus Spitter, stuff like that. Just 5 damage is really good for an ability. I'll discard an undead card for 5 damage. Think about splash this into nature. Reckless Spirit is undead. I feel like you read it, and then after you're done reading it, you're like, oh yes, and then you roll it up and you just beat them in the head with the scroll. Like that's how it is. You read it for the knowledge, and then you realize it's just better as a bat. That's kind of my opinion how it is, and it's just like it's a bat where you throw it at their head for 5 damage. That's how it's a weapon. Yeah, and look at the points on it. It's a good spear jab. Maybe you throw it as a spear. Maybe you put an undead spirit in and you throw it at them for 5 damage, and then it just comes back for more reading. I don't know. I didn't design the card. But yeah, I think this is a really good card for undead. It's a really good weapon for an archetype all on its own. It's probably not going to fit much where else, which is fine because when you compare it to its other shadow counterpart, Grimglider is just deal 1 damage at the beginning of your turn if you have more than 4 buffs out, or 4 or more, which is just a better weapon. Doesn't give supremacy, but like in a more buff-heavy deck. This one is, if you need the damage, you have the damage. They both do their own thing. They both do it really well. A Grimglider, I mean, it's seen in a lot of decks. I don't think this is going to replace Grimglider at all, but it's going to make it so that an undead deck has a lot more versatility to it, so you can deal damage. That's just my opinion. It's not going to be used to get Supremacy Shadow anywhere. It's just going to be used for its ability. And when you're running an undead deck, that ability is really good in an undead deck. It turns any undead card, like I said, into 5 damage. Even your healing ones, even your defense cards become attack damage cards. That's really good. It's really good to be able to get multi-uses out of a single card. So I think this card gets a 4-star rating for me. It's for what it does really well. And it's going to be really good in undead decks, I think. Next one, Poison. So here's a supremacy weapon. Like I said it before last week, all sets have one supremacy weapon, two non-supremacy weapons in their alignment. So this is their supremacy weapon. Two item slots, so only this weapon can be equipped unless you have the hero that can equip multiple items. Defendability, 1 damage to all other heroes, increases by 1 against your target. Once again, this is the card that I want to see in multiplayer. I want to run this card in a multiplayer Dread deck that just kind of like slowly dwindles everyone down in kind of like a Pestilence way, where it's like, no, I'm hurting him. Trust me, I'm hurting him. But everyone else, it's kind of like a downside. Like, I meant to hurt him, I swear to God, and you guys all just kind of go along for the ride. My bad, don't hurt me, right? I mean, we're all friends here, we're all having some fun. And this is one of those, this is like everyone goes down at the same level where it's just a universal hatred against you, where then if you're playing with my friends, they'll just kill you. They'll kill you and say, dude, stop it. Either focus on one person or no one at all. Like, no, I am. It's my target. He took 2, you guys only took 1, so it's fine. But, I mean, outside of multiplayer, I'm not sure if this card is really going to see that much play, unfortunately. I'm trying to think of what the other poison weapon was, if there was one. I'm sure there was. No, there wasn't. Dripping Dagger was the only other poison weapon outside of this. So this is the first one with an ability to it. But I mean, it's unless you're putting this in a deck to specifically splash poison in, it might be better just to equip Dripping Dagger if you want to equip more than one weapon. This is probably only going to get, unfortunately, like a 2-star rating from me. The damage is not that beneficial. Yes, it is a defendability, so you can prevent it from attacks. It counter defends. But if you think about it, like in single player, until multiplayer comes out, this card is not going to be good because it's only defendability to deal 2 damage to your target is what this card reads, and 2 damage with an ability, as I've stated before, is not good. Anything 3 or above with an ability is decent to do, which is funny because Night Lurker is a really good card and that's only 2 damage, but that one is run in a specific deck where you trigger abilities. That's what that one does. It's a shadow card. You can splice into shadow with all the other shadow cards. This is poison, 2 damage. You could have a better weapon that does 3 for 1 card slot. This card is not going to see a lot of play unless you're building a multiplayer deck, which I really hope multiplayer comes to the game soon. I want to build multiplayer decks so bad. It's going to be so much fun. But yeah, I mean, that's my take on the card. I don't think this card is going to see a lot of play. I really don't. So I'm going to go 2-star rating on it. You could run Dripping Dagger, get the same benefit, in my opinion. That's how I'm putting it. Viserius's Crown. Veserus? Don't know his name. Someone type in phonemes, I don't know. So this is the death one. No supremacy, 1 equip. Draw 1 card whenever another hero removes or returns any of your buffs. Now this card is just universally really good. I'm trying to think of all the cards for Shadow that you'd want to splice it in, but like you could just run this in a deck for its ability and be okay. I mean, you lay this really early in the game. Whenever your opponent, like you lay buffs down and your opponent removes them, and yes, you don't draw 1 card for each buff removed. So things like Crystal Leech removes 2, you only get to draw 1 card because it's the act of removing them, and they remove 2 at once, so it's not 1 card per buff removed. It's just 1 card, but still, like it makes your opponents. It gives you that non-downside of spending your whole turn laying buffs, where your opponents get a 2-for-1 trade. Instead, you draw a card, you refill your hand, you don't feel like it's that much of a down stack on your buffs. I mean, even laying this in an undead deck, have this be your second weapon along with the scroll, so all your undead buffs they put out there, if they remove them, you just draw a card. It could be the card draw that undead decks need. Really early in the game, lay it out there so that all your undead decks, when they have to let them expire, which is in case you can restart them, you can bring them back from the graveyard, and they'll want to remove them eventually, and you'll draw a card whenever they do. It's that card draw that I feel like a lot of decks don't have if they're going really heavy on buff, in which case this is just a really good card just for its ability to splash in. I think this card is going to be, I don't want to say a 5-star, but I want to say a 4-star weapon. It's going to be used for its ability more than its alignment, in my opinion. People are going to want to run it just for the card draw for their buffs, but the thing is you want to get this weapon out early, because if you get it out late game and your opponent has already used all of its buff removal, this card does nothing for you. It's a dead card in your hand. It's an item that really only utilizes 3 of your opponent's cards unless they're running cards that remove buffs in other ways. So it's like a weapon that you really want to have early game, because if you draw it in the late game, it's a dead card unless you're running it in an undead deck to utilize it for paying for combos. So that's why it gets like a 4-star rating, because it's good for what it does. but it needs to be utilized early because late game it's a dead card, and dead cards late game make you lose games. If you draw it and go, well, I can't do anything now, that's kind of where I balance this card out. So yeah, get yourself a Armor Smith. This card is amazing. Do it. All right, on to the combos, guys. On to the combos. Contamination. 1 damage to all other heroes. Increase this by 2 against your target. Reduce all of the heroes' healings received by 2. Only you and your target can remove this buff. Once again, guys, I'm telling you, multiplayer is going to be so much fun. I mean, essentially, this is the same thing that the weapon does, but you don't have to activate an ability to do it. So instead of 2 damage to your target, it's 3 damage to your target. So at the beginning of your turn, 3 damage to your target. Reduce their healing by 2. That's what this card to me says outside of multiplayer. Is that at the beginning of your turn, deal 3 damage to your target. Their healing is reduced by 2. So it's not a good card. It's really unfortunately not. I'm gonna give this, like, for how much it costs and what it does, it's like a 1-star combo. It's not that good. If it was in multiplayer, this card would be so much better because there's only 2 people that can remove this. It does damage to everyone, and they can't do anything about it. And does more damage to your target. Also, it reduces other heroes' healing. So, like, not just your target, but everyone else's healing is reduced by 2. So, in multiplayer, this card becomes a 5-star combo. But because there is no multiplayer, this card is a 1-star because I think Dripping Poison is 1 damage at the beginning of your upkeep to your target. Their healing is reduced by 6. I would much rather have that. Just a small poke damage where they literally just cannot heal at all. Just 6 damage mitigation is so much for healing. That, like, this one, and that one I think is only 3, so it's like 1 less than this one. But, like, Contamination, it's not a good card for what it does in one-on-one. In multiplayer, this is an amazing card. And if not, it doesn't do enough to affect the game in a way where you want to have this card continuously out. It's more used in a deck where you want this combo to pay for other combos. In which sense, it doesn't even run Shadow, and a lot of decks right now, at least in the current meta, run Shadow over anything else. So it's not a good combo, in my opinion. Until multiplayer comes out, this card is not going to be seen. Sorry. As fun as this card is, and as awesome as this card is, it's not going to be seen until multiplayer becomes a thing. And I really hope they get on that. I really hope they start developing that aspect. Death Shroud. Shadow and Death. Reduce damage received by... So it's Clunky Corner too, which means it's not just the next 4 turns. It's the next 4 sources of damage is reduced to you. And depending on how you're running your deck, this could be a really good combo. I mean, it's another wall. What rank am I? Oh god, I'm silver rank 1. I'm about to go to gold. I haven't unfortunately been playing the app a whole lot. I work like 50-55 hours a week. So, like, on top of that, doing other things, doing this Twitch stream. My game name is Razor Crusher. Same thing as my Twitch name. So, but yeah, I'm not that high in the app. I mostly play for funsies. I don't try to be that competitive. Mostly because once Kindred comes out, the game is going to change so much that I've mostly just been waiting for Kindred, trying to build all these decks in my free time rather than play the game. So, but I have quite a few aspects to my name. So I won the Middleton, Wisconsin National Qualifiers. I won the first ever Delivery Crab Circuit Tournament last year. I came in the top 4 in the Last Chance National Qualifiers at Gen Con. So, like, it's not that I'm bad at the game. I know the game. I know it pretty well, at least in my opinion. I hope my aspects of this is coming through. But yeah, I have not spent enough time on the app to really show that, like, hey, I'm in the Platinum ranking, or I'm in Diamond and all this stuff. Because the game, until Kindred came out, I had more fun with the game and with the actual physical cards, deck crafting and theory crafting, instead of playing Dolo or Selene. So, that's just my opinion. Once Kindred comes out this week, you'll see me on this game so much more. It's going to be so much more fun. But yeah, Death Shroud, it's what Dread needs is damage reduction, especially if you're thinking about playing this in a very heavy poison deck. You use your Shadow and Death cards to just lay combos. Your Shadow makes them, like, makes them not be able to heal. Dude, awesome. We'll play in some tournaments. Get on the Facebook group. Lightseekers TCG, join that group. A lot of people post when they're doing tournaments. I know Delivery Crab is doing a circuit. I know Play Fusion is working on their circuit right now. The game, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of U.S. presence outside on the West Coast. East Coast is where it mostly is. But yeah, then at the at PAX East and West, they have tournaments there. They're really focusing on the digital app right now, so they'll probably have digital tournaments soon. Gen Con is where the big tournaments are always held. It's where the game got produced in the U.S., got really introduced here. So, yeah, I mean, join the Facebook group, start learning about the tournaments, and that's where all of it's mostly posted. So, come on and join in. We'll get you in, and we'll get you into some tournaments. Well, I'll see you out there, man. But yeah, Death Shroud, it's a solid card for damage reduction. I think this card is going to be, I want to say 3-star. 3-star card. Comparing it to its counterparts in Dread, that run the same colors. You have Devour Soul, remove 1 buff, 8 healing. A really good card that's run a lot, especially for buff removal, stuff like that. Another one that does the same thing, I think there are 3 of them that have these 2 colors swatching, is Terrify. 5 damage, recipient moves the reaction cards from their hand to their deck. If you're being more aggressive, Terrify is really good. If you want healing, what was the one I said? Devour Soul is really good. So this is damage reduction. Compared to those other 2, I hate to say it, in my opinion, this one's probably actually worse than those other 2, because this is just damage reduction for the next 4 sources of damage. So it could be, in its own place, it could be good. But, I mean, looking at those 2, I'll probably bump this down to a 2-star rating, actually, instead of a 3. Because what it does good. But compared to its other replacements, it's not as powerful as the other one, in my opinion. Hand mitigation, I've already said, is really good. Removing a buff and healing is just really good. This one is a buff that could be removed. You get nothing out of it for a combo. That's what it is. I'm going to say 2-star rating, just compared to its counterparts. But for the gap that it fills in Dread, I think it fills really well. I think it fills it really good in what it wants to do. So now we'll go into the next one. Devour Soul is not a new one. Sorry about that, guys. Living Shadows. Living Shadows. 4 healing. Trigger your current effect on all of your poison and shadow buffs, including any abilities on them. Treat it as separate attacks and defends as applicable. This one, 4 healing, perfect. I'm okay with that for 4 healing to do a little thing. So you get that little added bonus even if you don't have a whole lot out there. But your poison and shadow buffs, I'd have to go through and look to see how much actually have abilities on them. But right now we've already discussed how Dusk Talon Assassin is just really good for triggering an ability without you having to do anything. Yes, you get to use the ability again. This one you don't because it's a combo. It takes your whole turn. But like 4 healing, put this in a Sicario deck. You heal for 4 and then activate Night Lurker's ability, which does all of the Night Lurker things that you were going to do anyway. So essentially this thing now becomes a combo for 4 healing. And it does what you were going to do anyway. But if you have like multiple things out there, I'm trying to think of what other buffs out there for poison and shadow have actual abilities on them. Actually, I'd have to look to give a proper rating to this because I do not know how many buffs out there have abilities on them. Mind you, with Abyss Hoarder out there using this, draws you a card each time you use an ability. I'd have to see if triggering them is technically using them. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure if it is, but we'll see. We'll see. It has to be on what is it? Poison and Shadow. So give me a second, guys. Let me look this up real quick just to see. We have Night Lurker, Poised Mercenary, Swamp Creeper, and that's it. That is it. So, going off of that, this card, unfortunately, is not all that good. Which is really sad. With this... Oh my God! Sorry, I'm looking at this all wrong. I was reading way too much into this. You're completely right. This just triggers current effects. It doesn't trigger abilities. It triggers abilities, but it also triggers current effects like Draga. Thank you very much, Grimjoe. Oh my God! I got too much into tunnel vision looking at the abilities on the highlight. Never mind. This is amazing. This card is like 5-star rating. It triggers all the Draga damage. It triggers all. Oh God, I'm going past it. It triggers everything. It triggers Draga. It triggers Corvus Shade. It triggers Pestilent Spectre. It triggers Putrid Infestation. Like Shadowy Supplier, Shadow Grave, Spectral Wood. It triggers everything. I completely apologize. Thank you very much for kind of like grabbing my collar, Grimjaw, and just going, no, you just look at the card as a whole, Frank. Come on, just pull it back, Razor. Just look at the card. So no, this is an amazing card. 5-star rating, not a 2-star, not a 1-star, 5-star. Just because 4 healing, yes, but then in Dread, like I said, very buff heavy, really potent on all this stuff. Your entire board activates all at once again after it was activated, which could just be ridiculous. Like, oh my god. I mean, Vile Breath Creeble is in there. Yeah, Swamp Creeper is in there. You could just Toxic Frog, deal 5 and 5. Stuff like that. Spectral Widow, more damage past your damage reduction. Shadow Supplier, draw a bunch more cards. Like, no, this is really good. Living Shadows is just really good. I mean, even utilizing this with just 2 buffs, getting those buffs to go off again with 4 healing, that's perfectly fine. There's so many cards out there that, especially in Poison or in Dread, that have the 4 corners that you wait the whole time to get to, and as soon as it goes in the 4th quarter, laying this to trigger those really good effects again is nuts. So yeah, thank you very much for coming to our rescue here, Grimjaw, because that completely changes my reaction to Living Shadows. Living Shadows is like a 5-star buff or a 5-star combo. You're gonna see this a lot. Will it trigger buffs that don't rotate as if it was the buff phase? So what do you mean by that? That don't rotate, like the clunky corner ones that have conditional rotation and stuff, like Contamination. Yes, it will. Like Contamination, if it's a consistent one like that out there, it'll trigger that effect. It'll trigger it twice actually, so that on that turn, they'll take 6 damage and their reduction is due down to 4 instead of 2. So that's how that card works. Is everything out there? I mean, even like, because yeah, it has to be poison and shadow buffs. But yeah, that one would react to all of your combo buffs as well. So anything, Chilling Curse would get increased by it. Crippling Toxin would increase by it. Drain Life would get increased by it. All this stuff would get increased by it, and it just makes this card so much more potent. Like, this is a card that is a game-ending card, and that's what these combos should be, is game-ending cards, especially the rare ones like this. Like, this one alone is going to make any Dread deck that final killing blow that you literally have to just watch out for. And it's only 2 costs. Like, something like this you would see be 3, maybe even 4 cost. But it's 2, which means you can just play it out of nowhere. You can have 1 card in your hand and lay this by paying with it. It's so potent. And I'm looking through here trying to find the other cards that are Poison Shadow. We have Amplification Hex. Meh. Not a lot of people played that. It was the increased damage by your other buffs, so it wasn't even like attack damage. It wasn't played a whole lot. Outside of that, yeah, outside of that, there is no other Poison Shadow buff for 2. So Living Shadows doesn't even have any competition to fill the slot that it did. And this one is going to see so much play. I can guarantee you in almost any Dread deck, this one is going to see play, because just triggering all of your buffs that are Poison and Shadow, including any abilities on them, is nuts. You have a Putrid Shaman out there too. It increases all the damage again. Like, this is just going to blow. Well, Putrid Shaman doesn't increase it doubly. I'm just saying with the Putrid Shaman out there, all your buffs would increase damage, and then like that damage increased again. So it's like Putrid Shaman technically did increase it twice, but like that's nuts. This card is a 5-star combo all the way around. It's going to see play in every Dread deck. Every Dread deck is going to have a copy of this card. I can almost guarantee it, which alone just makes all Dread buffs terrifying. Any buff out there is going to be terrifying to look at. It's ridiculous. Poison Spray. 2 poison, 1 shadow, 8 damage. Reduce your target's healing received by 3 while this is on the top of your discard pile. I mean, the only competition this card has, I was gonna say was Crippling Toxin, but Crippling Toxin is death, not shadow. So this one actually doesn't have any competition with its double shadow or double poison death. So this one could fill a niche for a certain deck type for more poison stuff. Mind you, in a poison deck like this, a lot of your poison damage is going to come from buffs. 4 corner buffs that necessarily stick on the board for a while. So you lay this card for 8 damage, And then there's cards and it's like, hey, restart all your undead buffs. Undead can be really good in poison or really good in something else. With that Veil, what's it called? Veil Rider, restart all your undead buffs so they don't go to the graveyard for another turn. So this could get like for 3 turns, 2 or 3 turns, make it so your opponent just can't heal for. That other combo, it will bypass the ability of limit of 1 ability turn because it'll trigger all the abilities, but it's a combo. So as soon as you're done laying it, your turn is done, which means you can't then lay or activate another ability. But yeah, this, I mean, if you have 2 abilities out there, it'll trigger the 2 abilities. I want to say, yeah, it's only under buff, so it doesn't increase, it doesn't activate the abilities on your weapons. But I mean, yeah, it could activate 3 or 4 abilities if you have the cards out there. It could activate all of them. It's just after the card is done, you don't get to go and activate more abilities because it's a combo, so your turn will be done. So there's that. But yeah, Poison Spray, it's a decent card. Mind you, with people, it's easy to play around because it has to be in the top of your discard pile, so your opponent could just remove a buff. They could make you discard a card. They could make you mill the top card of your deck, and then you don't get the extra benefit from it. So essentially, it's just, well, the big thing to look here is it's 8 damage. And in Dread, it already has a decent amount of cards that deal burst damage like that. You have Burst of Venom, which deals 8, could deal 12 if you remove poison buffs. It has Horrific Manifestation, which deals 10, moves 2 combo cards from their deck. So there's already a lot of cards in here that do a lot of big burst damage. So I mean, this one, you could run this and Burst of Venom all in the same deck to make it easier to pay for them. Both of them have big burst damage. It could be a decent combo, but it's nothing that really fills the niche that they're looking for. It's nothing that really improves upon anything that's going out there, so I'm going to go ahead and just give this a 2.5 rating. It's not something that would dominate over another combo that you would run. It's not really a hole that you're going to fill the niche in. It's a decent combo. Could see play, could not see play, but yeah, it's decent, but nothing special. It's exactly what it is. Raising the Dead. All right, we got our third 4-cost combo the third one that's 2 and 2 instead of the 3 and 1. Move 4 valid undead buffs from your discard pile into play. As we were talking before in the stream, this one could just be really good in an undead deck. Undead has so many buffs that obviously you're going to restart, you're going to store, you're going to bring back. Moving 4 of them from your discard pile into play is just really good, especially like as a late game card. You want to be able to lay all your undead buffs. You're going to want to do all this stuff. This is going to be, I mean, if we're looking at it, the card to almost compare this to, yes, dude, this card is so much fun. This card is just so good. If you're comparing it to anything, you can almost compare it to Reality Rift and Astral. Astral moves the top 3 buffs from your discard pile into play. This moves 4 buffs, does not have burn, so you could bring this combo back. It moves undead buffs in an undead deck that could just be all of your buffs in your discard pile. Undead has been some really persistent and stupid stuff. Yeah, Regrowth. Regrowth does the same thing. It moves 2 combos or 2 buffs back from your discard pile. This moves 4. This is just a really good card in an undead deck. Like I was saying before, this makes or breaks an undead deck. And this one totally makes an undead deck. And I think this is going to get a 5-star rating just for that undead. Obviously, this combo is not going to be played anywhere else outside of an undead deck. So comparing it to that, like, oh, it's not going to do well in the current meta. That's completely fine. You put it in an undead deck. This will make the undead deck work. This will make the undead deck so much more potent. Where, like, you know, they lasted through your early game. They got rid of your buffs. And okay, cool. Here's 4 of them back again. Let's see what you got again. You're like, well, that was unexpected. I am terrified. And then you lay Spirit Gate, bring 2 combos back so you can play this later. Bring your combos back. So it's a very cyclical undead deck, which is the theme I love about that family. But yeah, this is a 5 out of 5 combo. Like this is a combo that if you're building an undead deck, it's an auto include. You have to have it, or your undead deck will not be as good as it could be. That's what I'm saying. Like this combo is so potent, so strong, and it's 4, so it can pay for a lot of the other combos early on, and then later in the game when you want to lay it, you have it. It's so good for what it is. Shadow Form. So yeah, once again, 2 shadow, 1 death. Pay for it with this. Healing, reduce damage received from attacks by 2. This one, I mean, put in that undead deck could be a really good combo. You heal for 5, 3, 2, and 2. It's one of those things that you need the healing. You need to be able to last into the late game for those type of decks. I don't think this is gonna beat out What was the other one? Shadowy or Shroud of Night, but Shroud of Night isn't death; it's poison. So I don't really think there's a deck that kind of fits this scheme. This 2 undeath, 1 or 2 shadow, 1 undead. No, there isn't. So this is its own niche all on its own. It doesn't reduce damage from buffs. It's only from attacks. So like it's not completely damage reduction, which would just make this a rare combo instead of an uncommon. But yeah, I mean this is probably a 3.3 to 3.5. It fills a niche for a certain deck. I don't know how many. I don't even know if there's a combo hero out there that runs Shadow and Death to put it into that specific deck. So it most likely have to be in an undead deck alone. But yeah, it's healing where undead does not have a lot of healing. Against aggro where they run a lot of attacks, it's damage reduction against that. It's a decent combo that I feel is gonna actually see a lot of play for what it does. But it's nothing, like I said, that makes or breaks a deck. It's nothing that is going to be overpowered. It's good for what it does, and you're never going to be disappointed when you draw it or play it. It's like, okay, cool, I heal for 5. I mean, even the healing isn't ramping up to you. You want the healing to kind of dwindle down. So it's perfect. It's perfect. That's why I love Putrid Infestation, is because the damage dwindles down after the first one, and you want to be able to get the massive impact when you lay it. And that's what you get out of this buff, that you'll get the massive impact, which is good. I like it. Give it right around the middle, 3 to 3.5 rating. You're going to see play. It's going to see play. Sickly Touch. Clunky Corners. Death, Poison. When you get attacked, the attacker takes rotation damage and moves 1 card from their hand to their deck. Once again, this card is just going to be really fun to play. It's only in competition for combo slots with Ritual of Sacrifice. Ritual of Sacrifice was okay. I mean, it was really buff heavy removed, but when you get attacked, the attacker takes damage. So it kind of goes on. Just wait a second. I don't think this is trash. I think it's a decent combo. I don't know how it's going to be run in certain decks over the combos, but it's decent for what it does. I mean, when you get attacked, they take damage and they move a card from their hand to their deck. So it's once again hand mitigation. I mean, if you try to remove it with an attack card, you're going to take 3 damage, and you move a card from your hand back to your deck just for the 1 turn. If it's not, they try to attack you. It's okay. Like I mean, this card is probably not going to hit more than 2 or 3 corners before A gets removed or does anything like that. People are obviously running a lot of buffs, so this card isn't going to get. It's only with attack. But I mean, it's a decent combo. It's a solid combo. I don't know how the combination of Death and Poison is going to do really well. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Grimjaw, when you have this out, no one's really going to attack you. Everyone's going to start defending or comboing or just draw cards. But mind you, it is Clunky Corner, so like either they just never attack you again, or use. I mean, it also runs off attack abilities, so they can never use attack abilities or move a card back to their hand. So they're going to have to find damage in a way to either kill you the turn that it's like with a combo attack or something like that to really push the damage before it has any effect, or they're going to sit there with buff and defense. So I mean, the fact that it's Clunky Corner makes it into that 3 out of 5 for me, instead of like you said you gave it a 2 out of 5. But because it is Clunky Corner and not just rotational, I give it a 3 out of 5. Because for what it is, it's good. It's a defensive card. Yep. Yeah, the Clunky Corners make it so much better than what you think. Because it's like, oh, 4 turns. Okay, I just want to attack you for 4 turns. No, it's the next 4 attacks. Yeah, it's good for what it does. It's a 3 out of 5. It's going to be one of those kind of like Shadow Form where you're going to play it as a defensive combo, make your opponent slow down their pace, really get you lasting into the late game with all the stuff that Dread wants to do late game. So that's why I give it a 3 out of 5. I think it's a 3 out of 5 because of what it does as a whole. You're not going to be mad when you play it. Then your opponent's just going to be like, well, that's a bit of an annoying thing. And hand mitigation, you're going to find out, is really good. It's just really good. Yeah. Lay this with the roaming zombie, move 1 card back in the attack, and you're going to have to draw cards, and it's going to deal more damage. It's all the synergy that Dread has now is going to be so much fun, and I can't wait for it. I hope you guys are ready for it too. All right, Soul Whale, 1 of each. So I love these combos where they're 1 of each. They pay for everything really well. They're really easy to play. Soul Whale, increased damage and healing and draw effects from undead cards by 2. This combo buff, guys, it's a continuous combo buff. Oh my god. This almost be right on par with the other one that I just gave a rating of 5 to, Raising the Dead. Soul Whale is also another one that is so good in undead. It doesn't just increase it by it's by 2. So your Corvus Shade now does 4 damage and draws you 4 cards. Your obviously Spectral Widow will not get increased. Just saying. But like Shambler now does 5 and 5. The Corvus or the one that I said was going to be almost the same as Pestilence or Pestilent Shroud or whatever is going to deal 3, 3, 3, 5. This is going to be nuts. This is going to be it's going to be something that you are going to want to lay in an undead deck and then bring back once it gets killed to lay it again and make sure it stays out, because this is that card where the undead, from what I'm seeing in the architect, and I get a little bit of discussion here, undead is going to start out very trickly, start out very poke damage with your undead, restart it, make your opponent want to remove all this stuff, and then late game it's almost going to run out of steam until you lay the Raising the Dead to bring the 4 combos back. But then once that's all done, lay this as a permanent one to just increase all your undead by 2. That's gross. That is so much gross value. Like, you thought Shroud of Night was stupid, where like whenever you played a card, you drew a card, or Breach the Veil. Sorry, Breach the Veil. Increased damage done by 2 whenever you play a card and draw a card. So it's like, what? That is such a good comp. This one, an undead deck, pretty much does that. Like, this is so good in an undead. I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 for undead alone. I think undead is going to be a really, really stupid archetype for Dread, and I really cannot wait to see this family just rise from the depths and kill you. But yeah, that's how I feel this deck archetype will play. It's very trickling in the beginning. You know, maybe if you want to lay Soul Whale in the beginning to make it so like, hey, if you don't remove this, you're going to get overwhelmed ridiculously quick. So they do. Then you lay, you know, Spirit Gate, bring it back in your deck, or Raising the Dead later, bring those combos back. Then Spirit Gate, bring both those combos back, and like start doing just stupid stuff with your undead really late game. The only time this is not going to be good is obviously if when you're playing really hyper aggression, you can't out heal or prevent the damage from your opponent, because it is a very slow, grindy archetype where this card just makes it so that the early game has that really good push if they can't remove it. Late game has the better push once they can not remove it at all. But like, this card is a really strong threat. It's just a really, really strong threat for undead. And having 2 combos out of 5 that they put in there right now, I haven't gone through it all. 2 out of 5 combos would be really good threats for undead is gross. If it was just the 1, it'd be really hard to cycle through it, but 2 means that it's more consistent, more terrifying than what you can do. So I'm really happy to see this. I mean, for all I know, maybe undead won't do that good for what this does undead. It's so much value for it. Just because, like, undead's really good at bringing combos back and all stuff, and I'll go into it later, but like, I give this a 5 out of 5 for undead. Outside of undead, you're never going to see this card played. But for what it does, that's gross value. So gross. Venom Veins. I'm trying to think how many more of these. This is the last combo, guys. This is the last one. Damage. So we have Venom Veins. Obviously, 2 Venom, really good. Competes with Venom Burst, but that one's a damage one. This is a buff. Damage to your target. Deal damage to your attacker when you get attacked. So in the same sense that Sickly Touch was, when you get attacked, it deals damage back to them and all that stuff. This is just, it's a continuous damage buff, which is good, and it ramps up 2, 2, 3, 4. But it's like also, okay, so I'm always doing 2 damage to you. Cool, always going to do the buff damage. But then if you attack me, you get more damage taken, which could just be really good. It's also another thing that Dread needs to slow your opponent down, make them question whether or not they want to do this stuff to you. I don't think this will ever replace Burst of Venom, but I do think it's going to be played alongside a Burst of Venom. I feel like these kind of combos are going to be really good in a very heavy poison archetype, and having 2 combos that are just double poison, really easy to play, really easy to pay for, is going to make them really good. I'm going to give this a 3.5 rating, because as a whole, as a buff, it's decent for what it does. It's nothing too exponential. It's not a game-winning combo that deals that 12 damage and kills them in 1 turn, but it is a good combo. It's one of those that makes your opponent slow down, question what they're doing, while just dealing damage to them. It can be increased by effects too, so it's like, for 4 corners, this is going to be really fun, really ridiculous. So yeah, I think this is going to get a 3.5 rating from me. Good combo, good for what it does. You're going to see a lot of play. You're going to see a lot of play from this. Alright guys, I hope that was a fair assessment of my Dread alignment. I hope you guys understood where I was coming from. We had some really good discussion. I love hearing about that. So I'm really happy to be able to do these